Hey everyone, welcome to another fellowship. Well, let's see, what do we call it? Fireside Fellowship Friday. I'm so glad for those of you who are here. We're just having a casual night, hanging out and talking. See where the conversation goes, as always. I've got Kat up here and Big Chap, and we're glad for those of you who are here in the chat. Let's see who is around tonight. I know there are some people who've said that they're kind of going to be coming in and out and coming by later. I know Unspecified Podcast, Landon and Tiff are planning to come up. They were having some technical difficulties, and a few others are thinking about it too. Thanks, Heather, for stopping by. I know Dux is here. Thanks for being here and for all of your support. Snooks, as always, is working her magic and sharing it out and everything, which is fantastic. Thank you, Snooks. I appreciate you. I hope everybody's having a good Friday so far. I know I am ready for the weekend. Kat and Big Chap, how has your week been so far?
Pretty good. Mine has.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can't say anything different. Pretty good. It's been a beautiful week. I've got some stuff done.
What's up, Clay?
Yeah. Kat, you're kind of working on homesteading a little bit, right?
Yeah. Currently, I'm working on a garden. I've been working on tearing down a trailer that got burnt down, and I'm eventually I'm gonna get to building something.
Awesome. Yeah, that's great. It feels like I remember following along when you were first moving and stuff and getting your property, and I think you're like many steps ahead of where I'm at, but kind of, living the beginning of the dream. So it's fun to follow along. What Life, thanks for being here. Good to see you.
Hello, lot life. Don't pace yourself against anybody. It's life, and just do what you can while you can, and that's what counts.
Mm-hmm.
What up,
Yeah, that's tricky at times, right? I mean, it's so easy to compare, and I know for myself, like I feel like I woke up, so to speak, like later than I wish I would have. But I know I'm grateful for the last 2.5, 3 years that I've been working on preps and kind of changing the direction of things. Hey Vaughn, good to see you. Clay, thanks for being here.
Hey, Snooks.
Yeah. Sharon, thank you for being here. D-Dog, good to see you. Happy Friday. Yeah, I mean, I think it's,
So, what's everybody working on locally?
as far as like trying to incite change.
Whatever you can do. What are you working on locally to better you, yours, and your community? That it's always a question that I like to ask people.
Yeah, definitely. Great questions. Landon, Tiff, hello again.
What's up?
Thanks for being here. Hi, Anti. Thank you for being here.
Anti.
What up, Anti?
I think locally, like for me, a big part of my focus is just kind of gradually trying to make people a little bit more aware of the reality of life, if that makes sense. Looking for opportunities to kind of share in a subtle way. Because a lot of people, by me, I'm in a very liberal area, and a lot of people here are still either willfully, burying their heads in the sand, or behind what I think is a spiritual veil and just not really seeing through the fog. So, hey, Jorge, good to see you. Thanks for being here.
So have you anybody on this panel really have you noticed any effectual change that you've done? Have you been able to talk to people, change minds, show love, be an example? Just questions. Some good questions I'm kind of thinking of. Is there anybody looking to you for answers?
People message me periodically, and
Mhm.
it's incredibly humbling because I'm nobody. So, I don't know anything. And
Hey, man.
like our neighbors we have maybe to the most normal people, the amount of chickens and goats that we have is kind of crazy. So like we don't get to vacation anymore, and people think that's kind of crazy. And, you know, our neighbors are always asking questions about this and that, and they think it's kind of radical, like, oh, you're gonna eat them, like, oh, like,
Right.
or you're making your own soap, or that's I don't know about change, but because a lot of the people we live around, it's mixed. So like the town closest to us has kind of been taken over by, I guess, like it's very liberal. And then there's a bigger town that little town and the rural folks go to and it's very, I guess, conservative with a
Mhm.
lot of, it's a big mix. So but yeah, I mean, if you go around talking about, Project Blue Beam and coming deception, and the New World Order is going to have the whole world come together because of a fake alien invasion or something like that, everyone's going to look at you like a crazy goat herder.
But speaking of which, have y'all seen that? What was that interview?
Oh, some interview by Steven, I forgot his last name.
I can't remember, but
it's some top secret ex CIA. I don't know. I'll have to look it up.
Yeah.
I don't think I've seen that.
It's a good one.
Yeah. I've had a couple people, or a few people now, reach out to me who had kind of backed away when I was starting to kind of figure things out and ask questions. Like, I don't know. I didn't know what I was doing, and I didn't even realize I was waking up when it started. You know what I mean? It was just like, whoa, what is this truth that I just figured out? Like, what is that about? And I'd start like sharing that information out with my friends, and right away I started pissing a lot of people off by sharing the things I was learning and kind of questioning the beliefs that they had and that I'd held too, and that wasn't my intention. But I think because it started off that way, it kind of snowballed, and it was right at the peak of, like, a lot of that, at least in my world, it was like kind of when the shit hit the fan for everybody with like election integrity and BLM and George Floyd and like all of that all at the same, right around the same time. So people were already on like high alert, and a lot was happening COVID, all of that was all happening at the same time. So it was just like a huge, for whatever reason, with a lot of different people, with amongst them, and also with myself, a lot of like butting of heads and high emotions and a lot of frustration and communication and everything else. So and I've shared my story lots of times, but I think that I think it's true for a lot of people that they kind of experience that with either some people in your life or almost everybody in your life. Like me, it was like a backing off eventually, where I had to just kind of be like, I need to figure this out for myself, and I'm still asking all these questions and don't really know what I'm talking about. I need to kind of figure out what I think, what I see as the truth and what I can figure out on my own before I can really tell other people about it. And I realized people didn't really want to hear, the things I was learning. So I kind of stepped back for a little bit, and some of them stepped back for me,
Well, I think that one big thing right now that, this is not new news to anybody by any means, but I think one big thing that happens is within the, I don't know, I don't even want to call it the conspiracy community, but within the people with, open minds to think that, well, perhaps not everything I've been told is true. Perhaps things have happened that I haven't heard about. Within that community, there's so many false it's infiltrated. So for every real conspiracy story, there's probably 3 that are not real.
Right.
And half truths. And, my favorite are, so like of those people that were completely closed minded, Now they're a little bit more open-minded just because they have to be. But I think of them as like Netflix conspiracy theorists, where they're like, "Oh, did you see on Netflix that they're poisoning the food?" And it's like, well, listen.
Or did you see on Netflix? It's the social media. It's gonna be,
right. But it's in my head. I'm like, look, if it's out on Netflix, that's also controlled narrative. Even this interview that I was just talking about, I really liked it, but as Landon and I were watching it, we were like, this is full of half truths. Like I feel like I can.
But with those with eyes to see and ears to hear, they can hear, like, for instance, he was switching things. Like he would call it Project Skybeam rather than Project Bluebeam.
Right.
But still, if you could see, through what,
Yep.
Dude was a legit MK Ultra hitman for the, CIA with, higher than
that.
I
believe that.
Yeah.
And so at any rate, I just feel like it's first off to decredit anybody who is bringing a new idea. Because, for your true idea, there's 2 more that I've heard that weren't true. And second off, it gets the community to kind of eat each other in a sense where it's like, oh, that person over there, they think the earth is flat, but they don't think that Project Bluebeam is real, or, I don't know. There's just so many different ones that, I don't know, you kind of see people attacking each other over which ones are real, which ones aren't.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I guess it's just been a little encouraging to have a few people kind of reach out. And, I feel like in their reaching out, even though actually two of them have like specifically apologized for, the conclusions they jumped to, or for not seeing what was going on from my perspective at all. You know what I mean? Because now they do see it more from my perspective. So that's been kind of nice.
Yep.
I feel like there's some waking up happening there, some truths being revealed. But a couple have just reached out, and I don't know. I don't know if I don't really know where they're at this point, but I'm glad that they're at least willing to be in communication again. And I'm willing to be in communication with them too, because I do think that we need to be still trying to reach across the aisle, and the more people that are aware of what's going on, the better our chances are of righting the ship.
Yeah, the division is silly, but there are some folks who have their minds made up.
Yep.
And with those, that's an unfortunate case. You can still lend out that hand of like, well, look, I'm ready to talk whenever you are.
Right.
You know what I mean? But they're not, they
at that point, show love and be a good example.
Right.
Yeah. Yep.
I guess I'm kind of realizing in this conversation that I'm not the best, because when people do start coming around, I'm like, oh, great, you're accepting to the fact that maybe the food is not as good as what we think it is. Now, let me tell you about every other theory I have.
Right. Yeah. And I think that's what I started off doing, because it was like, whoa, I just learned about like all these things and I want to tell everybody,
Right.
And just, like I do now, I want people to be asking the questions with me, and if I'm hearing what other people have to say, then I feel like I get a better idea of what the truth and reality really is. So I started off that way, and it was like people were just kind of like, whoa, like what is happening with this girl?
Yeah.
But,
that's an awesome mindset to have. That's an awesome mindset to have, but not everybody is going to understand or be willing to entertain ideas outside of what is normal to them. And usually with that, it takes a lot more, proof. And I don't know, at some points it comes to insurance, because you have to be like, hey, I assure you that I know what's going on, and here's the proof. And this is how I live by it.
Yeah, there's so many different levels of the iceberg you want to introduce these people at. You know what I mean?
That's
you
right.
Take them right here and just show them the tip top stuff and kind of sneak them in, or you go right for the bottom and tell them it's all about Satan versus God, basically.
Right.
Pretty much.
Exactly.
That's the truth.
That's what it boils down to. All of this shit.
100%. I've just had that conversation with one of my family members last night, actually. And it was really interesting, because I actually, the more I have the conversation and get to that as the base of it all, I feel like that's almost a place where more people are willing to go, than to look at all the nitty gritty of what that looks like. You know what I mean? In reality.
Yeah.
I think people are willing to,
Yeah.
not everyone, but a lot of people are willing to think, yeah, we know Satan's at work, and it makes sense. It feels like things are going good, evil versus good, where they can feel that, but they might not know, all the steps that are along the way in that.
Yeah, it's a shell shock to a lot of people, bro.
Exactly. Well, it comes down to you can
Go
lead a
ahead.
horse. You can lead a horse to water. You can drown the horse in water, but you can't make the horse drink the water. It's up to the horse at that point.
Cognitive dissonance.
Yeah.
Yeah. It
Yeah.
can be fragile. And that's why, I can't just go speaking everything that I know, so I try to stick with the most important thing, which is Jesus. And then you can get attacked for that. People will say that you're beating them, you're shoving by, but I don't shove nothing. I just give the credit to God where it's due in the conversation, because things will come up where, it doesn't make any logical sense about how I live, where I live. That's the Lord. So praise God that he blessed me with my living situation, and, so on and so on. But,
Amen. I've told people for the longest time. Go ahead. Sorry.
No, please.
I've just told people for the longest time I'm on God's path. That's my belief. I've put my full faith into it, and me and my family's never went without. And that's really the most important thing I can say about it.
Chuck, I like how you put things. He said, I always used to say you can give someone a rope, but it don't make them a cowboy. Love it. And John had asked what the topic was, and Kat had kind of said, what are we doing locally to, help things change? So we sort of are going from there.
Locally.
That's one I need to work on, I guess, because so throughout all of this, because the world, we see the world turning in the way that it is, and people behaving in the way that they do. It makes it to where I kind of avoid. I don't like going out in large gatherings. I don't like going to the city by any means. And so
and that's it. Another thing I was thinking was that, some folks are called, some folks have different callings. Right. And so, some folks aren't necessarily people or, and that can be, changed, right? We can change and challenge ourselves and whatnot. But how do I say this? There's only so much you can do. So for instance, it's an individual basis. So I've never lived in the same place for longer than 5 years. This home situation where we live now will be the longest situation that this will be the most stable situation that for 30 years that I've had my entire life. So I'd never had a hometown. So, I mean, it's not like, locally is subjective. It's like, yeah, I mean, I live in a local area, but it's actually like a tri area. So it's in between 3 different municipalities. It's in the, the outskirts. So local is subjective. So we could go to, I guess, all 3 towns and try to talk to folks or do something locally. But, we're already kind of overwhelmed here at the stead.
I want to be.
My family grew up poor. We had to struggle for what we had. That's it.
Yeah. Well, and I think more and more people are able to relate to that, unfortunately or fortunately, you know what I mean? But more and more people are getting to a point where they are struggling and they're feeling it. And I think, as that continues, which I think it will, then more people are going to start kind of waking up to reality too, because they're going to start asking why things are going the way that they are.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
I guess I have the most sensitive spot for statists, people who I don't hate to say that, like it's such a thing to call someone, but someone who just loves, or I don't know, they just can't detach from Daddy Gov.
Right.
And that sounds hateful to me, but I don't mean it hatefully.
But
I say it a lot worse than you do. You sound very kind. Continue on, sir.
Because while we're sitting here, okay, we're kind of drawing more and more away from, I don't want to say society, but drawing more and more away from like the out and about and the big groups and stuff. Those type of people are clinging ever more tightly to more restrictions, more grill. Oh yeah, UBI, that sounds great.
Universal basic income, or if there should be a law for this or that, or
right. But meanwhile,
well, actually, the universal basic income makes sense because look at how many robotics are doing jobs that humans should be doing, and these corporations are, paying politicians to pass these laws and decrees and everything else, and that's how they get away with it. Otherwise,
exactly.
They would be forced to pay people to check you out.
Right. And eventually there'll be no way because human jobs will be mostly replaced by robots. But what that does, just like with Medicaid, just like with, all these state fundings is it gives a control of power. And I'm not just saying, I'm saying like,
that's right.
Takes a lot of power from the people.
You better vote for this bill or don't expect to get food this month. You better vote for this bill or you're not.
You better accept this, or no check, like the STEMI. You know what I mean?
Yeah, right. And with
I'm cool without receiving a check.
Say that again.
I'm cool without receiving a check. I don't need to live off of anybody. It'll be tough,
that's one of my favorite
I can make
lyrics.
it on my own.
There's an Aaron Lewis song where it's "I've never needed government to hold my hand."
That's right.
And I love that because I've tried to get a loan before, and I know this sound. I don't know what this sound makes me sound like. I've tried multiple times, a few times to try and go and get a loan for this and that, and I've never gotten a loan. I've never gotten a handout. I've never gotten a stimulus check.
Right.
You know what I mean? And so
Amen.
I'm like,
Amen.
You don't need them. You just need God. And the only way to get to him is through his son.
But I will say the further and further, look, I don't know who knows this, but there was a major bank in Silicon Valley that collapsed and was taken over by federal this week. And
was it Wells Fargo or Bank of America?
Honestly, I can't. I've got the article here, and it looks like it's Silicon Valley Bank, but that can't be right because I've never heard of that. But like, apparently, they're responsible for the backing of just gobs and gobs of startup tech companies. And so though it's not necessarily big news to the average Joe, in the tech industry, it's like a huge deal.
Yeah.
But like, meanwhile, we've got, so like, that's one step closer to digital currency. That's one step closer to programmable money. And once that happens, like those who are not ready don't have a choice anymore. So like, if you didn't get chickens, well, guess what? If the money is programmed for, here's $20 for milk, here's $30 for gas, they don't put $50 in there to go buy yourself some chickens, and so to an extent,
find locals in your community.
They are going to make it to where you're supposed to inject your chickens or whatever. They're going to come up with a that's either going to shorten the lifespan or the laying cycle of the eggs.
They already are. Aren't they putting stuff in the feed?
That's right.
Well, that's why you either got to make your own feed these days or you have to supplement.
Right.
And so
that's the other thing too, because now you can go out and get chickens, but the supplies you need to maintain those chickens is becoming expensive. I'm sure those of you on the panel and out there in the chat that have any kind of livestock or animals at home, like that cost is going up. That's the other thing too. So like you remember like right at the beginning of the thing that happened a few years ago that they raised the price on the seeds. That wasn't by accident either.
Yeah, well,
remember when they roped them off?
At that point, they even outlawed some states from growing gardens.
Right, and
there were people that complied.
And if they didn't outlaw it, then they want you to register your garden with the USDA.
Have a good night, Rocksteady. Thanks for coming by.
And then on top of that, they want to say that there's
you have to comply at that point.
Right. And then on top of that, they want to say that there's forever chemicals in the rainwater, and they want to say, they want to get you jabs for your chickens and jabs for your cows so they don't fart anymore. And And meanwhile, Portland, like all of the Walmarts are closing in Portland, right? And
Yeah.
that's because of all the theft, right? But what happens? Look, Walmart has already come through and closed down the ma and pa stores. So I know there's been a lot of theft in California and all along the West Coast. But if that was orchestrated, like we know some things are orchestrated, that can be orchestrated nationwide. And what happens when all the grocery stores are no longer open because they can't afford to be because there's too much theft? Well, then you better have, look, Landon and I don't even have
I've been trying to
Amazon
get out.
account.
I've been trying to get out the grocery store. That's been my main goal for the last year, is to stop going to the grocery store, because I believe a lot of our ailments and a lot of our a lot of our issues, the common denominator is at the end of the day, we're all going to get, we're all going to the grocery store.
Well, and the other thing unspecified that I've been doing is I've actually been doing more fasting and doing more, and it's amazing how the lesser because you're talking about you all you need is God. And it's in it that there's a understanding there that the less, it's kind of interesting because yes, there's the health benefits that are associated with it, but it's like the less you're putting in their junk, the more crystal your mind is. And so it's like, yeah, it's one of those things,
I love fasting, but it hasn't really, it hasn't been a huge option for me since my heart attack because of the medication that I was put on. I haven't crossed that bridge yet. I haven't gotten back to fasting. Now I fast other things, like I completely quit nicotine. I don't drink coffee anymore, or like I quit these things. I give them up. And, but other things we do is, instead of like going and buying the bread at the grocery store, Tiff makes her own bread, either rolls or biscuits or loaf bread, and it's unadulterated, So in a way, you're fasting from adulterated, products.
I know for myself, I'm not maybe as prepared as I should be, and I'm doing everything within reason. But I'm also at the same point now.
Nobody's as prepared as they should be.
No.
You could literally take me off of food right now, and maybe I die in 3 days, but I'm going to be singing hallelujah to Jesus all the way through it.
That's right.
And that's the and that's the thing is I have the prize already, no matter what they do to me.
That's right.
That's right. And I personally,
you guys got to remember, all the power goes to God, and whenever He expelled the Egyptians out of Egypt and rescued them, He made sure that they had sustenance. They had manna, everything that fell from the clouds, like
water that came from a rock.
That's right.
That's right.
But they didn't like it. I mean, you think about it, they didn't like it.
Well, that generation of Hebrews, they complained. But the next generation of Hebrews, Joshua, they literally were given the ground they walked on. So that's the thing, is that generation of Hebrews, if they walked onto a place, and basically if they wanted to take your kingdom, they could take it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And they were using instruments to take down city walls. I mean, it wasn't like they had, RPG.
Frequency, vibration.
Yeah.
It's the same thing that everything has been made from, is the word of God. Man doesn't live on bread alone, but by every word that proceedeth out of the mouth of God.
That's right.
Amen.
I have such
last night.
Amen.
I have such a mixed feelings on prepping because of that. Well, no, not really mixed feelings.
I mean,
we like to be prepared. We like to, but like really, I support more of a sustainability than prepping, because really in Revelations, they tell you, the Bible tells you that in the end, and forgive me, I don't mean to misquote here, but in the end, basically, when the trumpet sounds, you are not to go back, not even
for those like in Jerusalem. If you're in the city, you don't even have time to go back inside and pack. You got to leave and go to the mountains or go to the caves or something like that. But, it's still going to be the same, pretty much the same policy. You're working on a sustainable relationship between you and the Father through His Son is the most important thing that you can do, because He's going to make sure that He cast your cares onto Him because He cares for you, or cast your cares on the Lord. He will sustain you.
And that's why we have to be prepared that way. That's where a lot of my preparation's for, because I do believe from my reading, and I don't mean to get too much into Bible stuff. If people want me to, I'll shut up. But I in Second Thessalonians,
weeping, wailing, gnashing of teeth.
But in Second Thessalonians, it talks about how God's going to get out of the way and He'll let the devil come through. And to me, what that shows me is that the things that God's working through now, He'll stop doing that. And at that point, if you don't have the truth, He says He'll send a great delusion to those people. And it's like, That's over. So it's like now is the time to prepare for that in your mind, your body, your soul.
Amen. The best
And I
thing you
think, and I
can
think,
do
I
is
think the
keep it
sustainable life is a part of that for sure. I think sustainable life, I think, yeah, living more understanding, like not abusing food, realizing that food is for energy and sustenance. It's not for comfort, because if you are using it for comfort, then you obviously have a joy that is going to be lost when you can't.
Isn't gluttony
You're
one
going
of
to
the
sell your
seven
soul to
deadly
make sure that
sins?
you get more of it. You know what I'm saying? Like you'll be addicted to it so much that so.
Yeah,
Listen,
that's a hard one for me, to be honest, because growing up, like food, I mean, for a lot of people, I think in the United States, food is like such a pivotal
Yeah.
part of
right,
all of our gatherings.
right.
You
But
know?
It's all by design.
Yeah,
Yeah.
God
And spoiled big time.
also
Big time
says
spoiled.
that if my people
well,
will
Wait,
humble
listen.
themselves and pray, I will heal their land.
Yes.
That's right. He also says, serve the Lord your God, and he will bless your food and your water.
that's right. But not just spoiled. I mean, like, yes, we are spoiled in America. However, a lot of us and Landon and I's generation grew up like mom and dad were both gone at working. If you had mom and dad, you know what I mean? It was usually like for everybody I knew, it was usually just one, and they were always gone working. So when mom and dad weren't home, you know, food was. And so like I know my weight issues came a lot from comfort eating, and that's something that I've had to work with the Lord on. And you know, and yes, fasting has helped. And but yeah, like that was definitely two birds with one stone step there, because you know,
Destroy the family.
right.
If you think about it, we weren't designed to have 24-hour a day food right at the fingertips.
No.
Like
Right.
we used to have to hunt, gather, and you might not even get like any vegetables or fruit for a while. Say
Hold on
you
one
killed the
second.
deer,
Right.
Sorry,
got the
BC,
deer
one
meat
second.
to eat up, so you might just eat protein for a
BC, hang
while.
on a sec. Blue Unicorn, thank you so much for coming. I see you have to go. I really appreciate that you're here. I just didn't get a chance to say hi, but thank you for coming by. All right, sorry, BC, keep going.
That's pretty much it. I mean, we weren't designed to do that. So fasting actually is part of our natural diet.
Well, and if you think about like the Inuits, like the Eskimos and up like in Canada and the Arctic Circle in Alaska, they'll eat such high sustenance fat that like bear and moose and so, and that
Whale
literally that will have to last them for the entire winter, you know. Like, and so that's kind of why their bodies are used to eating those high fat foods that normally for most of us would just make us, you know. But they're also not eating like a lot of the same carbs. They're not getting the 64 ounce, you know, sodas because,
Not all that
you know,
sugar.
it's so
the
expensive
refined
to get
sugar.
stuff shipped up there anyways. You know?
That refined sugar is what's killing everybody, man.
Oh, yeah.
If you looked on that, they say that's the worst drug out there.
Yeah.
That's what I've since Thanksgiving, just after Thanksgiving, I have cut out almost all sugars. And it's been amazing. I feel like more clear-headed, and I feel like I just have better energy. I've lost weight. Like my blood pressure is better than it's been in a really long time. And I mean, I think it's different for each person. You know, your bodies work differently, but for me, I've found that to be just an amazing starting point, at least, you know?
Amen.
Yeah.
You know what's so great about this is, to me, is that we're all waking up to the fact that all this hurts us. But the thing is that, to me anyway, is that God is in control. And my way of thinking is we are definitely in the book of Revelation. That, you know, so everybody's got to choose which lane they want to be in. They want to be in God's lane, or they want to be in Satan's lane. If you're in Satan's lane, you're not going to pay any attention to what's going on. You're going to think everything is just the same as it always was.
It'll be automatic for them. Automatic thinking.
Keep chugging right along like you always did, which is not good for you.
Yeah. Hey, TZ, thanks for being here. I know I haven't gotten to shout out a bunch of people that have come in. I'm really appreciative of everybody that's come by. I always love seeing everybody here. Thanks for coming and hanging out. I hope you guys will participate. Anti has been dropping links, but if you have a question for the panel or anything like that, maybe put it in all caps so we can make sure we see it. And yeah, we'll keep on talking, see where the conversation
Yes, Kelly,
goes.
we saw that. Sorry for interrupting.
No,
Sorry.
you're good. Yeah, we were just talking about that, Kelly. Anti's dropped some links for that information also.
Yeah.
Yeah, Anti dropped
Bonnie?
something a few minutes ago about banks collapse, top 5 warning signs.
Yeah,
Myself,
Bill Bailey did a show on it too. Bill
I'm sorry.
Bailey did a show on that. The one
Bill
that did.
Bailey, yeah, Sons of Liberty.
Yeah, I'll
Mhm.
put it in chat. Here's the link for that one.
Awesome, thank you.
I think it's already happening to a lot of banks. Wells Fargo is one that's completely changing their. They're not going to be a bank anymore. I can't remember now what it exactly was or is that they're going to be, but it's not a bank.
This bank is SVB.
Yeah. No
It's,
problem, Kat. Thank you for coming up. Appreciate it. If you're able to jump back up, we'll keep going for a bit. So come and hang out more if you can. Yeah, Bonnie, thanks for being here. If anybody wants the link, my email is in the description of the channel. Or if you have another way to already get a hold of me, contact me and I can get you the link. It's open for whoever wants to come up.
You guys were talking when I got in here, and I was asking about what the topic was, and you guys were talking about how you do something on a local level. I think the first thing we have to do, especially those of us that have that background of having a Christian worldview, is we need to come together and say, okay, like we may have our disagreements on certain theological issues, but like let's get united because we're all people of God, and if you affirm who Jesus is, that's the essential right there, but also working in your relationships and making your relationships better, and that's kind of what I'm trying to do now is say how do we get to a point where we can reconcile with friends, and how do we, because I do think that we're in this age where they want us attacking each other, they want us fighting, they want us thinking that each other is the issue or our neighbor is the issue, when really it's the people who have the power who are trying to put us into this new age and whatever their things are. But mending your relationships, and learning to love each other, because I do think that there to quote Gandalf, there's still some good in this world, and there's and it's still worth fighting for. And that doesn't mean that you don't affirm what you believe. I mean, obviously you should always go with your conscience, but be able to kind of come to terms and learn to love each other, because then once we build out of that, we can then kind of be united and say, okay, then when we have stuff, like when we're talking to our friends, because we've all, I think probably on this panel, have all lost friends for speaking the truth at one point in our lives, right? Would you say most of you've felt that way or have had that experience? I know I have, but.
Well, you're absolutely right, John. The only thing, but Christ said, don't worry about your neighbor, worry about the beam in your own eye, before you worry about the
right. Well, but what I mean by what I mean by your neighbor is, I mean, by showing love to your neighbor.
Yeah.
That takes away their defenses, and then that allows you to have more conversations where they can hear you out. Whereas if you kind of come at it as, hey, by the way, let me tell you how you're all wrong. Let me tell you how, and
yeah, we don't do that. See, I had a friend recently visit me because we don't get to leave very much. And they go on to talk about how we should be in debt, and that's how you work the system now, is that you leverage debt. And I'm sitting there like because Bible verses are going off in my head about like you shouldn't sleep until you've paid back your debtors, or like so like it's not biblical. And this is a Christian friend, but instead of being like actually you're wrong, or like throwing all these Bible verses at them, I'm like, oh yeah, I mean, not to be fake or but it's for the relationship, it's better for me to not immediately tell them that they're wrong, or address everything at once about, because we just couldn't have a relationship,
Well, and that's how when you're talking about, like earlier, Indy, you were talking about how you cross over the aisle. I think also you have to find what that common ground is. For example, I watched, I don't know if you guys saw, Tulsi Gabbard at CPAC had something she was talking about tribalism being an issue, and the fact that we just are all at each other's odds. We were forgetting that we're all God's children. And, I think that's probably now a radical or an extreme thing, quote unquote, right-wing thing to say now, is to say, hey, let's stop fighting or trying to, but But you see that, and you look at those kinds of things, and then you look at like even what Rogan was saying on podcast about people just okay, yeah, okay, there are people who've been wrong and they're wrong about a lot of things, but we need to forgive them because that gives us the opportunity and gives them the opportunity to start to have a conversation and really doing that very organically and natural, so that whenever they come to you, they don't ever think they're going to be on. Their defenses are not always up. They're not thinking, how's this person coming to judge me? How's this person coming to tell me how I'm wrong? They're looking at, hey, Big Chap or Andy or Ronnie or unspecified. They're bringing something to me. They're talking to me. They're relating to me as a human being. And then I've always found that, the first time to hear something, it's always hard to hear it the first time because either your biases or you get defensive, especially if you're being criticized or someone's showing you some in love. Hopefully they're showing it to you in love. They're being constructive about their criticism. But usually for me, I try to go, okay, 20 minutes later, go, you know what? Now I see what you were saying. But we need to be able to give people that room to be able to do that. The problem is that it's getting harder and harder to do so. And I don't think that's by accident, because
No, I don't either.
Right.
now the slightest thing, all you have to do, and Unspecified was saying that, now all you have to do is just say one word, and you can say Jesus and just watch the people just get triggered right away. Or you can say things that are just fundamental truths that are now hate speech. And that's,
And I agree with that. I really do. Because ideally we would be able to go and say, hey, can we all just agree on Jesus? But, even in 2 Timothy, it says, having a form of godliness, but denying its power, away from such people turn away. Because there are so many people, you can claim Jesus. You can go to church every Saturday and still put money before Jesus, and still put power before Jesus, and still put your entertainment before Jesus. And so if your priorities does not have Jesus first, then that's a fundamental issue. So I agree. I would love to be able to just unify on Jesus, but we also I think we need to find a way to talk to people and say, hey, I love you.
That's right.
Exactly like you were saying, I love you. I'm sorry to see how you're living. I'm sorry to see how this is going, but whenever you're ready, I'm here.
Right.
At the right time. You know what I mean?
At the right time. Yeah.
Straight up interrupt them and be like, you know what? Talking about this dead stuff, I can't. But look, I love you. And when you're ready to talk like a normal person, or not, I'm just kidding. We're not saying do that. But that power keeps coming up, because he does say that, again, in 2 Timothy, where he's like, for God doesn't give us a spirit of fear, and everyone knows that part.
Exactly.
But then he says that he gives us a spirit of love, or he gives us love, power, and a sound mind, or self-control, or self-discipline.
Right.
And you can check folks, especially in a heated argument, like, are you operating in love?
Yep.
Is this the power that he was talking about? Is this self-control, or
And I've seen that in my own church, where I saw someone just flat out go on the defensive, and I said, aren't we supposed to be a family? Aren't we brothers? Don't we share in the same love of Christ? Because if we do, then that shouldn't be our reaction. Now, I understand it's human nature to get defensive about things. And I understand that it's in our nature to, if we see something that's right, to advocate for that. I don't think that's wrong to do that. But I think for me, what I'm going at is I'm saying there's a check system and mostly for us, so that when we get into that position and we're ready, we want God to use us at the right time, where we're going to have the maximum impact in someone's life, where when we're saying that truth, anything that we could be putting in the way of that message is not going there. Because there will be a time where you do actually have to cut off an arm if it causes you to sin. And I don't think that's just about yourself. I mean, I think that's about, if there's someone in your community and they're constantly always, into sin and constantly going against the will of Jesus, and they're unrepentant about it, and you've tried to talk to them with a couple of brothers or sisters, and they still don't want to, then that's fruit, right? And that's the thing that people don't want to think about with Jesus, is everyone talks about how Jesus is loving and caring, but they don't ever talk about the fact that he killed a fig tree outside of Jerusalem because it didn't bear good fruit. And the point of that isn't that Jesus was killing. I can imagine a lot of people now getting so triggered by that idea that Jesus is going around killing trees, but the tree was already dead. That's the point.
Right.
Well, what I set up
It
there,
was just giving it its finality.
the people people getting triggered because they don't want to leave have a real conversation and leave the metaverse. That they say that they'll take an uncomfortable lie or a comfortable lie over an uncomfortable truth.
Mhm.
Yep.
Yeah.
They don't
Yeah.
want
And
they don't want to hear the truth because it bothers them so bad. So they just
They like hearing those things that make your ears tingle, which is a lie.
Mhm.
And as I
Right.
think it was Christ said in the Bible.
and
Yeah.
then and I
Hey,
don't mean
Clay,
this.
I'm
I
sorry.
don't mean this. No, I'm sorry, Ronnie. Go ahead.
No, I was just said hello to Clay. Conspiracy music.
Yeah. Have a good night,
Uh,
Chuck. Thanks for coming by.
hey Clay.
and I don't mean this offensively to anybody if it pertains to you or your church or anything like that, but the enemy does infiltrate the churches. Like they do try to bring their half truths into churches. Like I've seen articles where they're trying to take gender roles out of the Bible, so God does not, he's not referred to as a him, even though he is the Father. And on top of that, like I wish that we were in a time where, like, so Linda and I, we really only listen to a Christian radio station, right? And they do sermons from all around our area. And so, you don't hear the same pastor every time. You'll hear someone new. And I used to, like, I love hearing the sermons because sometimes, man, we'll just be in the garage working, and boom,
We'll be out in the yard or tending to something, chicks or goats or
and
something.
all of a sudden there's like just an awesome message that hits right on the nail, and it's exactly what we needed to hear. And it's I
Mhm.
mean, it's food. But then sometimes, like this morning, my son and I were working, and I thought that this sermon was going to be awesome because it was about prayer, right? And the pastor got on and first off was talking about how, he was trying to make a point, but like in the point, he said that God is confusing. Well, I know for a
Whoa.
fact
Yeah, no.
that
We know who
the
the
Bible says,
author of confusion
right, God
is.
is not the God of confusion. And then he's making, simulations that a man needs to go down and birth his pains and stuff. And I'm like, that's really kind of a line that you don't really want to mess with right now because of everything that's going on. I don't know. So a lot of churches are trying to be inclusive, and that's great. Like we were talking about one church, I don't remember if it was on here or on one of our chats, but we were talking about one church that like the pastor is like having church services at the pub because that's where he's able to reach people. And I do
Mhm.
on a very strong level believe that you got to
What
minister
was
to
it? The
people.
pub or was it a golf? It was a
Like a
what
country
do you
club,
call those golfing range, or what is it? A
country
driving
club
range?
kind of thing.
Not a
Clubhouse.
country club,
The
but
clubhouse.
Clubhouse.
it's more. It's not like exclusive. Country
Gotcha.
clubs are exclusive in my mind. It's like a place where
Oh
anyone
yeah,
can
I know what you
go.
mean. The club. Yeah, I think it's called the clubhouse though. I think Chap's
Yeah, it
right.
is
I mean, I
inside
can't
the golf
remember.
course.
I
It's the clubhouse.
thought one of them was at a pub though, and I
Oh,
could be
well,
wrong though. I
I'm
could be
not gonna
wrong.
judge if that's where you're
Right.
gonna
I
go.
do
And
on one level very much believe minister to people where they are because if you're if and
oh,
this
that's
applies
right.
to
They would
me.
go to these breweries.
Right.
A brewery.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay. Okay.
If my nose is so stuck up in the air that because I'm on my path and you're not living right, that I can't relate to somebody and I can't minister to somebody, then my faith is without works and it is dead.
And
So that's something I have to work on. But at the same
Yeah.
time, like I'm stumbling because of the world the way that it is. I have to be careful and I have to watch my path or I will become that,
Right. And we're
it
we're
was
called as Christians to be in the world and not of it. So
exactly.
I think I was actually thinking back, I used to actually work at the church where I grew up. I worked there for a little bit after college. And I remember being, kind of seeing the behind the scenes of the church. And I remember at the time, even before that, there'd been a lot of talk about, wanting and I know the desire was good, but I think they were trying to make our congregation look like our community. And part of that was making it more diverse. And I think, like I said, that intention was good, but looking back on it now, that church is very woke.
right.
And
Right.
now, and I
Right.
think that they kind of crossed that line of, I remember them talking about wanting to reach out to the community and basically be more like the community to get the community to be more comfortable coming to church. But
Right.
I think that's not right either,
No, because I think they're fundamentally missing this idea, which is this idea that this is one of the things I think one of the reasons why the American church has died out is because when you try to offer what's in the world, it's usually a pale imitation, right? If you're trying to make your church into a nightclub, there are better nightclubs out there, and I'm not saying that as a slam on anybody. I'm just saying and if you go and you try to pursue things in the world and they're of the world, there's something about that. We're supposed to be, as Christians, counterculture to the world. We're supposed to be, like you said, in it, not of it. But I want to hit on something that Mrs. Unspecified said there. As we're talking about the church, and I do think it's important to acknowledge the spirit of what's going on in your church if you're a member of a church, because or people in your community. Maybe you're not in an organized church, but maybe you're like in a Bible group, or you're in a place where you're interacting with people. But there's a verse here in the book of Jude, and there's only one chapter in Jude, that kind of explains both what to look out for, and if you see that in your church, you see that in your community, you should be very wary of it. And then also tells us kind of what I was saying, what you should be doing. And I'll start here with the 18th verse here in Jude. They say to you, in the last time there will be scoffers following their own ungodly passions. It's these who cause divisions, worldly people devoid of the Spirit. But you, beloved, building yourselves up in your most holy faith and praying in the Holy Spirit, keep yourselves in the love of God, waiting for the mercy of our Lord Jesus Christ that leads to eternal life. And have mercy on those who doubt, save others by snatching them out of the fire, to show mercy with fear, hating even the garment stained by the flesh. But so the thing there is when you start seeing these things happen where it's worldly wisdom, it's devoid of the Spirit.
Like the WHO and the WEF and everything that's world government, right?
Yeah.
Well, have you guys checked into your churches? Are they 501c3s or prayerfully not? But I'm just wondering.
I think most of the organized churches that are Christian, and most of them are 501. I think a lot of them are.
A lot of them are.
And that causes a big problem for me. And that's
me as well. But we've actually, not trying to be too judgmental, just we've tried different churches around us, and we're still looking for it. Like, we don't have a church home,
right?
But we've recently moved here within the last 5 years.
Because I also, I feel like some of these big mega churches, where they're so buddy with the state. And again, that sounds so judgmental. I don't mean for it to, but the state is not trying to enhance or the state is not trying to put you closer to God. Okay?
No, that's exactly what my point. Exactly.
And so if the church is buddy with the state, well, the state is not a fool. All right. They didn't get to the power that they got to by being foolish, other than the sense of the term biblically.
Right. They are a fool.
They are a fool. Right. So then I have to call that into question. I have to say, okay, well, what are we really looking at here? Because if I know that the state is not trying to enhance my soul, my spiritual walk. So if the state is so gung ho about this church, what half truths do I need to watch for?
Well, and the other thing too that's interesting, and I think Indy will get this from her background. I, being in some of the churches that I'm a member of, almost every church I've been a member of, we've had a school, and there's a push for a lot of people in our church to get our school accredited. And you're like, but what does that require? I mean, what exactly, and I think, to like what Ronnie's saying, I do think that the more you're bound by certain laws that you're putting yourself on, you're going to have to choose. I think the more you're
losing all your
freedom to the government, you're going to have to choose, and that's something that I try not to take one extreme position on the other, because I know people who feel very strongly on both sides of that issue. But I do believe it's a matter of time. You're going to have to pick. If the more you're trying to get more money from the government, or are you trying to make yourself a bastion of truth? and you can't have both. Not in my opinion. I think it's very hard to do both.
Yeah, and the problem with 501c3s is they more or less in a lot of cases force the preachers, pastors, or whatever to talk on what they want to talk on, to leave out certain phrases and and things in their sermons.
Right. There are certain topics you're not allowed to preach against.
Yes.
Or else, you'll lose your, and that's a good example of the UBI or the stimulus checks or,
right.
Another form of control where it's like, and not to look, I'm not saying that you're wrong for going to a church that might be a 501c3, or if you don't even know if your church is a 501c3, there's nothing wrong with that. If your preacher is preaching on hard truths, you know what I mean? Because it's not impossible to be 501c3 and then to just talk about Jesus, the most important part.
That's right.
You know what I mean?
I agree, but they're a lot more likely to be the other way, because they are accepting the tax-free.
Right.
That's pretty much quid pro quo in a nutshell, right? You do the sermon like this, and we'll give you a kickback and some money.
Well,
yeah, really quick, I want to address this comment from Spike real quick. He said, "Is separation of church and state because state doesn't want to be held to biblical standards."
Exactly.
But no, I think originally what I've heard, the intention was actually to protect the church from the overreach of the state. Yeah, the separation wasn't to keep God out or the church out of government. I mean, it's written into it. It's really was the other way around. It was that
I believe you're right, Andy. But I think that was what the purpose they used when it was actually the other way around, like LSP said. But it's like they always do. They give us one reason, and their reason's totally different than others.
I do think I do agree with what I do think that I'm very careful of saying anything fatalistic about certain issues, especially with churches and organizations. And I do think that because my church is a 501c, we don't have a constant issue where we're at of the government coming in and telling our pastor. However, the question comes, and like we saw this issue happen with where they were trying to push some of the schools and because our church and school hires people, and they were trying, and I'm sure Indy, maybe you've seen some of this. I don't know if you have or not, but they were trying to, the government was trying to push to have our school pay the teachers for their abortion health care, That's where I think
I'm sure that's covered here in Washington.
Yeah. Well, and that's why, they finally fought that back a little bit and they were able to kind of get that. But that's the point, is that at some point you're going to have to make a position. And I think this is too about the thing about the church, at least the organized church, is we're going to have to ask ourselves, what matters more, the organization or the mission? And if we put the organization over the mission,
exactly, John,
we're at a problem. We have a problem because the mission should always come first.
That's right.
But I feel like, the consequence of that is you get a lot of feel-good messages, which, not to say that, look, if you're coming from a path that had no Christ, a feel-good message is going to go a long way for you. You know what I mean? Like, it's all dependent on where you're at. But like true, like in my opinion, so you're subject to have your own opinion, but in my opinion, true, like gaining true advancement in your walk with Christ is going to have more hard, difficult conversations. And and so, like, hold on, I'm trying to pull up a verse. So sorry, give me just a second. Okay, so like, for instance, oh, of course, I went to the wrong thing. So sorry, guys. Okay, so 1 Corinthians 6:9-11. Know ye not that the unrighteous shall not inherit the kingdom of God? Be not deceived, neither fornicators, nor idolaters, nor adulterers, nor effeminate, nor abusers of themselves with mankind, nor thieves, nor covetous, nor drunkards, nor revilers, nor extortioners shall inherit the kingdom of God. That's a lot. Like, I don't know anybody that doesn't hit one of those. You know what I mean?
Right.
And like, that takes some real work on yourself and with God. To echo what Echo said, like, I think that we are the church, and
That's
like,
right. You are the church.
I think
Yeah,
that
the people are the church.
That's right.
exactly.
That's
And
right.
so like I think that home churches, like, you know, because used to be you would break bread with your brethren, and you know, and it was a whole thing. I love the idea of Shabbat, to be honest, but that doesn't go with my religion per se. But you know, it's I don't know. I just
Well, and I think it's what's important is being able to understand, because I do think sometimes we get into a place where um, we diminish organized Christian churches, and there are benefits to corporate worship. There are benefits to hearing somebody outside of yourself telling you that your sins are forgiven and reminding you of those things. And it's good to have like where someone's there. And so what I would say is that the Christian church and having a church, a place to have worship, there's a lot of people who think, you know, I can worship God on a mountainside, and that's not incorrect. But even God wanted a holy of holies constructed because he had an idea that certain things, certain sacred work is done in a certain place. And so again, I think the important thing is that we as Christians are the church, and where one or two are gathered, or two or more are gathered in his name, we have become a church. I do
That's
think
right.
though, I want to say this. When I mean the mission, I don't mean given like a soft, sugary, you know, syrupy kind of like, you know, Rob Bell type of sermon where you're saying there's no hell. Because if you don't let people know about sin, and if you don't make them realize that when Jesus comes back, he's coming back as a judge, you're really going to make people get less of the
Judge,
comfort
jury,
that the
and
cross
executioner.
provides. You know, because that's the thing, you know. So that is something that's important. So when I say the mission, I'm not just saying, you know, what's right for getting people in, because to me, I would rather us as individuals grow in Christ than to grow
yep,
my church
that's
numbers.
right.
That's the point, I think.
And
Amen.
hey, just so that I don't cherry pick and Brew W is right. The next verse after what I read is and such were some of you, but ye are washed, but ye are sanctified, but ye are justified in the name of the Lord Jesus and by the Spirit of our God. So that's the big part, right? That's the biggest verse. But I personally feel like, you know, our God does not change. So what he liked then, he likes now. And when you grow with him, obedience is the natural response to growing with Christ, in my opinion.
That's why
And I
it's
think,
so important to be in the Word
yeah,
and to
and I think the
and
Bible talks about like don't go away from what your traditions are. And I think the point of that is obviously if traditions overstep the message, if they overstep what Jesus does for you, and your salvation or your hope is in what the tradition is, that's a problem. But there is a benefit, and I think Indy could also probably, with her experience, because I can tell you as someone who went to a parochial Christian school, the benefits that I got from going to a Christian school.
I went
And
to a Christian school.
yeah, and so I do think that there is something about if you do have a place of worship, and even if it's not perfect, even if there's things that your family says and does in your church that are wrong, you pray that they would be right. You would pray that they would find, you know, they would listen to truth and all that. And you have to be willing to say, hey, if they're so out of context with what the Word of God says, then that tells you right there that that's probably not the right place for you to begin with. But
Yeah.
it is
I know
important to not to
even
just easily divorce ourselves from what we have, because I think there is something to be said about the benefit of keeping in what some of those things that you have from a child perspective and a development perspective. You know what I'm saying?
yeah.
What do you think, Indy?
Yeah, I was gonna say, well, first off, hey, Wingnut, good to see you. Hey, Apple Dumpling, glad you're here. Yeah, growing up at a church, I mean, I don't think there's ever gonna be a perfect church organization. You know what I mean?
Right.
Because we're imperfect. But
That's right.
I loved my church growing up, and I really felt the Spirit moving at my church often, even before I even recognized what that really was. You know what I mean? And I grew up with a really incredible group of people, like a year older than me and a year younger than me, and I'm still very close with a lot of them. Some of them still are people that have pulled away or haven't been in close communication with the last few years. We're still on different pages, but I wouldn't change that for anything. And I mean, I've said this, and I don't want people to think that we're down on all churches. The church that we go to now, when we go, is an amazing church. I think it's the most like Christ-like church I've ever seen. I mean, I don't know if they're a 501, whatever, the 105C or whatever it is. I don't know if they're that or not, but there's no programs, there's no like curriculum that they follow, except for the kids program. There is for the kids, but it's very much like, looking at the Bible, we're going through the Bible. Sunday mornings are, going through the Bible. It's basically reading through the Bible, and they go in like a book at a time. It's not a lot of, it's like teaching. It's more like a teaching church, I guess I'd say, than it is someone telling their opinion. It's like talking about the history of what was happening at that time, looking at the wording and the basis. I can't remember what's the word, etymology, when it's like the base of the words in Greek and Hebrew, like really looking at the foundation. And on top of that, it's come as you are. I mean, people come strapped, people come in jeans and a t-shirt, people come in sweatpants. I mean, it doesn't matter. You could literally show up in your pajamas and people wouldn't bat an eye, really. Like, I've never been to a church that's like that. And it's pretty small. But it's grown a ton over the last couple of years, including when we started going, because they never masked up. They never followed any of that. It was like a beacon for everyone who was feeling like their church was failing them for towing the narrative and pushing the narrative. And so it became like this place that drew a lot more people to it. And I think that is exactly what we're called to be as Christians, whether we're going to a physical building or we are looking at ourselves as the church. We're supposed to stand apart from what the world is doing.
So, you made one really good point there, Andy, about they didn't make anybody mask up. That was a great point. And the other point was that they're growing. Yeah. I think now a lot of these big churches, of course, they have, that's with 501c3 and everything, they have the backing of the state. So that's one reason they grow. But the little churches that grow like that, in my opinion, are from the backing of God.
I got a question. If this whole construct that we're in right now is God versus Satan, right? And if the establishment is aligning themselves with Satan, basically, well, then isn't that like a conundrum with the churches aligning themselves with the establishment and taking money and shit from them?
Well, I mean, I think it's the same. Yeah, it's the same as any any organization that does that. I mean, look at how the medical profession has been.
Well, that too, but I mean, the churches are high to a higher standard because they're like basically lining with the people that this whole debacle is against.
Yeah, that's
a good point.
It is.
That's a good point.
But that's what I'm saying. I think that some churches, and it might even be most churches, but I don't think that it's all churches, because I know of churches that aren't, and I know there's others out there besides just the one I go to,
Yeah. Well, I'm not saying all.
Well, and I think too, the other thing about what you want to look at with churches and organizations, especially organizationally standpoint, I think if you see a very centralized or very extreme organized hierarchy, that sometimes can be an issue, a big issue. And usually when you have influence in the world, like some of those churches do, then that becomes, I think, a very questionable thing to be skeptical or weary about. So, a little church that's I mean, I don't blame a church like my church that does the 501c, because they, I mean, I believe that they've been misled about an idea, which is that, but again, that goes into an issue about what your belief about taxation is. But I do believe that they kind of have already fallen for a a misconception about what an organization is or what a church is as an organization. But I don't think you can say that a church that it organizes itself as a 501c is part of the control structure, especially if it's a little mom and pop church. It's only got 100 people that's out in the country, you know?
If I may
That's
interject,
great, John, because I think that a church should exist only on what the people can give. If it's a chicken, we'll give a chicken, you know, whatever. But
I agree.
Look,
when you start
I
taking
believe that
or tax kickbacks, well, then you're, you know, I think
I
you're
believe
just my
two
opinion.
things that I don't think that it sounds contradictory. That I believe that taxation is theft, especially when you have government sanctioned this and that and things we don't agree with. But then, my king of another kingdom says to give unto Caesar what's his. So like he picks up a coin, he says, "Who's that?" And they said, "That's Caesar." And he said, "Well, give unto Caesar what's his."
Yeah, how many
Right, but
churches
we have
would
to be
Jesus
careful about
in?
how we construe that, because he isn't saying, and I think some people believe that, and you saw this happen in the last few years, like, oh, well, they're telling us we got to do this, we got to have our protocols, we got to do, and what he's trying to say is meaning that what, you know, and the time of Caesar in that country, he had that kind of centralized authority and power.
I'm just saying, like, we should pay our taxes, and that if, you know, it's
Right.
probably going to go better for you if you do.
Right.
And but I'm saying, you know, my personal belief is I still think it's theft, right?
Yeah.
But
I do think that, because I do think when it comes to what we are supposed to render under Caesar, he's never saying if Caesar says something that is completely out of bounds with what I'm saying, then back Caesar. And I think sometimes people make that, especially people who are quote unquote liberal Christians, tend to make that argument a lot. Especially
I don't know. I wasn't trying to make an argument. I was just saying that
I'm just saying,
I believe taxation
saying,
is theft, but it probably will go better for you if you and I'm specifically saying pay unto Caesar, not do what Caesar says.
Right.
Right, but people say that render under Caesar, and what I'm saying is that they use that as their reason for listening to everything that the government tells them, and then
I'm not familiar with the render verse.
Right. Well, it's depending on what version of the Bible you're grown up with.
I hear that.
All right, so let me ask you this: if taxation is theft, which I believe it is too, and the government hooks up with these churches and gives them a kickback of the money, basically the church is taking stolen property. Isn't that against thou shalt not steal?
That's a valid point.
Really good point.
That's a valid point.
I haven't thought of it like that before.
I don't know. I mean, this is why I feel like I'm spiritual. You know what I mean? I believe in God, and I know He's real, and I know He's the Father of Jesus, and you know He's got us. My trust and faith is in Him, and I have no fear because I know He's with me.
Amen.
But that doesn't mean I have to go to a church and get all dressed up and put on the spectacle in front of everybody every Sunday either. You know, if I read my own Bible and I pray when I want to pray, and little sessions like this, I mean, this is more intimate to me than sitting in a church with 200 strangers.
Mm-hmm.
Just think about the baptizer, man. Like living in the wilderness, relying on God. You know.
Yeah.
You know, folks came to him more than you know.
Like I said, I don't like to be fatalistic about what and say, well, I can, it could be one way or the other way, because I do believe there is a benefit of having a community that you worship together with. I believe there's a benefit of corporate worship. I believe there's a benefit to going somewhere. And again, there are people out there who are going to still be those type of people who sit in the front pew and they dress nice and they look down on you. And those people aren't God's people. They may go to his church. They may go to a church that proclaims his name, but they're not his people, because he tells us that
they're the Pharisees.
Well, yeah, they're the Pharisees, but I don't even use language like that, because to me, the Pharisees they were the elites, obviously. But really what it comes down to is that, you know, Jesus tells us, you know my Father's word, but if you knew his word truly, you would know it means to love. And so what good does it do to know these things and memorize the Bible if in your heart you don't love, and that your first intention and your first idea is, well, let me just judge everybody that comes down. And I also think we have to be careful also, especially for people who are outside or don't go or are a part of an organized church, to say everyone that goes to a church is a judging, dresses up as a, kind of, and I don't think that I think that there are good and bad with every situation, and you have to make that best decision, pray to God, and I don't judge any one situation as one thing or the other. I do want to say, just as a matter of objective statement of fact, that being weary of how it's okay to advocate for something, but I'd also say, if you're going to advocate for something, then advocate for it without saying something else is bad, or because I said it doesn't necessarily mean it is. And I'm not saying anyone is saying. I'm just putting that out there.
I also just wanted to clarify, because I don't know. I wasn't trying to justify 501c3 with the verse with Mark 12:17 here. I was where Jesus says to render unto Caesar what is Caesar's. I was just saying that Jesus did say that. So there's definitely he has all authority. So we ought to look into what he means by that.
Right.
I don't know what I mean by that, but it came to my heart, and so I spoke it. You know what I mean? I wasn't aiming that at anything specifically.
Yeah. No, and I think I didn't take it as such. And I think
I was reading the chat here. It looked like maybe someone thought I don't know.
The way I take that verse is he was saying, of course, pay your taxes, but in this case with the 501c3s, it's the other way around. They're offering to give you back money more or less if you do what they say.
Right. Well, and I think that's where the clarification is on what exactly happens with the 501c, because if there is any kind of rebate, and this is what I was explaining earlier about and maybe Indy, if I don't know if your school does anything like this, you could give us your actual insight for actually working at a church school. But from the experience that I've had working on church boards and whatnot, I know that when you get like accreditation for a school, that they'll give you some money for that. But a lot of 501cs don't actually receive funding from the government. What they do is they are able to not have to report some of the things as taxes. So when they buy stuff for like church services, or they buy stuff, or when we use weight, or when we're paying our pastors or teachers, then we're not reporting the same amount of tax on that. So it's not about so much as, in my mind, and if I'm wrong, please correct me, but I from what I understand, it's not so much about getting money from 501cs as it is you're claiming that as not being taxable, because it shouldn't be a taxable thing to begin with. But
it's just like lying by omission, John.
What's that?
It's kind of like lying by omission. You're not paying, you're not taking the stolen taxes, but hey, you do this for us, and we won't tax you on any of this other stuff you're doing. So you basically
well, and that's why I'm saying I think that's why I think there's going to be a point where any organization that's a 501c that does that, there's going to be a Rubicon they're going to have to cross. And if they cross that position where now they're getting a lot of money, and they're looking to get a lot of money from the government, and that therefore is going to impact their ability to also be a church of Christ, then that will be a problem. And when that happens, those churches are going to have to fix that, or they're going to have to. And I do believe this. I'll be honest with you guys, as somebody who goes to an organized church on a regular basis, I do believe that eventually every church that's organized, a lot of churches, are going to be in the hand of the devil. Because if you think about what 2 Thessalonians tells us, it tells us that when what I call the man of lawlessness, some people call it the Antichrist, but when the man of lawlessness appears and he puts his position in the temple, I don't see it so much as a literal temple, but I see it in the temple of the hearts of every person, and he will rise above the object of every type of worship. That means any and everything that's ever been considered sacred ever in the history of mankind will surrender itself to him, or they'll be of Christ. There will be no choice. You'll either believe in the it'll be that or Christ. And I do believe when that happens, I do believe the Holy Spirit takes a step back, and the ability for the organized churches to still remain of Jesus probably will fall out. So I think that's something worth considering and looking at. But I do believe I would just be very careful about how we would look at what, and you're talking to someone who has a lot of exploration and roots of anarchism and libertarianism. So trust me, I'm not saying, but what I'm saying is that I think it's important that we don't just say that 501c churches are getting like blood money I think that would be too much of an exaggeration with every
Mhm.
case. Maybe that is the case in some churches, and that's why I was saying to Indy about, like, I've known churches that have done that where they have gotten the accreditation, and I was like, I don't like that. I'm not a fan of that, because you're going out of your way to look for that government money, and what are the standards that they're going to put on your education that will be of worldly secular standards and not of Christ.
But John, don't you think that when they do take the 501c3 exemption, that they're kind of selling their soul to begin with? Because I mean, if you're already an organized church, then what do you need them for? I mean, file your taxes and everything, and you're still going to do very good.
Well, they need them. The argument, and let me make sure that you understand that I'm saying the argument, because I'm not necessarily myself promoting it or not promoting it. I'm just trying to be fair with the argument and making sure that we're being as fair as we can. But the argument would be that we're already in a system where it's unavoidable that you're going to have to pay taxes on wages. And that is a question itself on how organized church gets, and I see this like every Christmas. It seems like there's always, like, I'm in a Facebook group, and they're always like, it's a quote unquote Christian group, and they're always like getting triggered by the idea that somebody's wanting to take Christmas Day off, and they're like, well, we need employees. And I'm like, okay, so you're thinking about this as an organization. You're not thinking this as a church. Like, you're not thinking about this as a worship thing. Like, and I do think that those things can happen. And when your focus is not on Christ, then that's the problem. But I don't think every 501c is intentionally or even sometimes knowingly trying to take blood money or hush money, or they're going to, I think they just realize that they're in a system. Their belief is that they're in a system where when they do have to believe they have to hire a pastor, because they believe that it's right to have a pastor, and they can give you a reason why that is. And then they have other costs. Every organization has a cost. And so because it isn't most of the times, unless you're like a mega church, some of those seem to be for profits more than others. And that's not all of them. I'm not going to make that judgment, but it seems like there's a lot of organizations that are just trying to, within the system, they're within what we have now, they're trying to play by the rules of what they think is a right, fair thing.
Yeah. I keep thinking about what Christ said when they would go somewhere. He said, don't take any money or anything. People, in other words, what he was saying was, if you're worth what you think you're worth, you'll be fed and paid along the way. You don't need any script, any money. And
right.
So
and I do think that a lot of churches have done a very bad job of how we look at the issue of tithing, because a lot of people believe that first fruits means giving money to a church organization. And that's not necessarily what the biblical understanding of what first fruits is, in my opinion.
I personally think that, like, I agree with that, some of them along the way could have just been doing what they feel like is right and the best that they can in the situation they're in. However, my outlook on it is that 501s are kind of the same territory as what the UBI is not so much what it's done so far, but what it can
regardless
do in the
of what it
future.
means. Like, it doesn't mean that it's necessarily going to affect the message or the mission at this moment, even though they already have.
But it could, and they need to be aware of that.
Right. It's a potential future control mechanism that is already built in now. But I don't even like getting, because I'm not against folks who go to a 501c3, and I'm not saying that every 501c is dead.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. I pray for them truly, because there is that now, it's kind of like driver's license. If you never get a driver's license, you're not beholden to have a driver's license. But once you get a driver's license, you
sign your right away.
Right. You have to have a driver's license in order to drive. So kind of the same thing with the 501. It's like, hey, if you never enter into it, you're kind of good, and you can preach what you want.
And it's the same thing for anybody that takes any kind of welfare. And when you start taking funds from the government, and it does lessen your ability to be able to speak on things that are happening that you don't like. I think that's a legitimate, fair thing.
Doesn't Jesus speak directly about like the church supporting itself, though? I mean, I feel like
it should. Yes, and that's what are you familiar with the principle of subsidiarity is, Indy?
No.
It's a principle that was brought out, and I think it's been a Christian principle, but the idea is you start small. So, for example, if you need something or you're having an issue with something, you go to your family first. And if someone in your
Oh,
family
right.
can't help you out, you go to your friends. If you can't go to your friends, you go to your church. If you can't go to your church, then maybe you go to your local government, or maybe you go to a person that you know that's a charitable person in the community. The whole point is that you go to the federal government last. The whole point is that you go to those entities first, and you should go to those principles first, because who better to obviously, if those of us have had the blessing of a family that has the means or the desire to help you out when you need it, that is a blessing, and it is good to have that. And I do think, I will say this.
It's like
Well, who votes for the 501c3s nowadays? Is the pastor, the board? How does it work in a church to become that?
Well, a lot of that probably is done when the church is founded and when they get into their bylaws and their the Constitution and stuff like that. A lot of churches have constitutions or bylaws about that stuff, and when they form that, they do that. And then there are classifications for when you do taxation or taxes or on the wages of your pastor or on your teachers. I don't know how it is in Indy's church, but we actually consider our teachers in our church called, meaning that they're it's not just a job, it has a calling. And there's actually and I'll be honest with you, I've had some drag out fights in my own church about how should we who are we to allow the government to define what the called status is.
Well, I agree, but it just seems to me that when a church and the pastor, the board, however that works for each churches, once they decide to become a 501c3, it's like they're saying, okay, our soul is for sale. If we start making a lot of money, well, then we don't have to report it or whatever. Well, then that just don't seem right to me, because if you start making a lot of money for the whoever to begin with, then you're going to be rich. So, but if you do it the other way around, if you accept the 501c3, then you're agreeing, or the government is saying, well, you keep all that you make, we won't ask you a question, because, and why do they do that? It's because they want to put you into a corner. They want to put that pastor into a corner if they have to. And if he goes to teaching something they don't want to teach, want to be taught, well, then they say, you can't do that. We're going to yank it away.
And I think paying off the sheriff, bought and paid for.
Yeah.
And I think you see that in places like Canada. Whether we're at that point here in America, I don't know if we are, but I think we're pretty close.
I think we're there myself. But to be honest with you, I quit going to church a few years ago myself because of this one thing. Because I could tell. And my preacher and I were and still are good friends. But I could just tell by the sermons he gave and the talks we had alone, that I could tell where he was at. I didn't have to ask him. It was very plain.
Right.
And so I just,
Star, good to see you. Glad you're
here.
here.
I'm not knocking anybody that goes to church. I mean, yeah, I think it's great. But I'm just saying it for me, that kind of ended it right there.
Mm-hmm.
Do they still pass around the plate in them 501?
Some churches do, some don't. Some have like what you call like an offering box or a tithing box at the front of the
Even
sanctuary.
if they're a 501c3?
Well, I mean, I can't speak for every church because I have not been to every church there is.
In mine, yeah.
But of the churches that I've been to that are part of the 501c, they either do an offering in the service, which I'm not a big fan of, because the last thing, especially my church, we used to do the offering, and my current church, we kind of do the offering after the sermon, and I'm not happy about that, because it's kind of like, here, let me tell you about how good Jesus is now. Well, collect some money, and I think that comes off to me as kind of very crass.
I had to after my church. I had to ask them how we donate, because I never heard them ever bring it up. Ever.
Right. Well, like I said, a lot of churches will have like a little box in the front that you can do, or you can just go into the office and then maybe write them a check or whatever, however you want to support that. And so
Bonnie,
there are
very
variations of how that works.
Much love to you, Bonnie.
Much love, Bonnie.
So,
good night, Bonnie.
In similar news, but kind of not really. I saw an article yesterday that was from End Times Headlines, and it was saying whistleblower accuses top evangelical leaders of money laundering, tax evasion, and lavish shopping.
Oh yeah, I believe that for sure.
Pastor
No
want a
kidding,
new
yeah.
car. Pastor want a new house.
Yes, man, I believe that wholeheartedly. Well,
Oh yeah,
look
there's
at
a lot of grifters in the church, unfortunately, that use the church as their own personal bank account. They use it as their own way of and again, those people, you should know them by their fruit, and that
Yep.
is the important thing. And um, it's sad when you see that happen, because those people are ruining the church. In fact, one of my favorite quotes from G.K. Chesterton is, he says, we'll get to a point where the only people who will persuade people not to be Christian are going to be the Christians, because you'll see that those very hypocritical things. And that's why it's important that we be careful of what public controversies we get into, and we be careful about how we judge people, and because when you speak as we are in a very public place, in a very open space about these things, people will determine by your demeanor, now sometimes people are able to use honey words for sure, but I think most of the time you can tell where people are at based on how they speak about it, how they treat the issue, how they treat each other. And that, I think, is a dead giveaway. And it's like that guy, like, guys, you know who Creflo Dollar is, right? Creflo Dollar?
No.
So Creflo Dollar is one of these guys that's in what they call the prosperity gospel movement. And he literally made us, in one of his sermons, he talked about, like, if people don't give money to the church, we should just line them all up and then use an Uzi on them. And I'm like, you're supposed to be a pastor, and that's what you said, like seriously,
Yeah.
I'll just use an Uzi
Funny of
on
those
them,
prosperity preachers.
Yeah. And those people are, of course, charlatans, and they don't reflect the true Christ.
What's the curly-headed guy's name from? I think he's in Houston,
Joel Osteen.
Joel Osteen.
Yeah.
That is one. I know. My wife used to love him, and I said,
really?
"Why are you so crazy about him? He hardly ever mentions Christ's name, or he didn't even say Jesus. Maybe once every 4, 5, 6 dozen words or so. It just his were just feel-good sermons.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Down
It
here.
makes me sick.
Well, and then a lot of times he's like, his message is like, and I'm not trying to begrudge anyone that likes him. Like, if you found something that makes you gravitate towards Christ, then I'm glad for that. But you got to test the fruit. And I'm telling you, a lot of the fruit that comes out of that guy is bad. And when you say your best life now, I'm like, wait a minute. I also then think about Peter and John, who were being scourged in the temple after Jesus died for saying that he was God and he had risen from the dead. And they looked to each other and said, take heart, because we're suffering just as our Christ did, just as Jesus did, So
well, anybody
ask those apostles if they had their best life now. They didn't. They got
is in a world of trouble.
Yeah.
That's just my opinion, though. But I mean, and anyone like him, and I know there's several out there like him.
Oh yeah. And I think if you see these pastors, I think, again, not that they can't speak truth about certain things or that they can't have a good perspective on something, but I think you should be very, very, very wary if your pastor or a pastor of a church is coming around wearing a $2,000 suit and is getting around in a jet. Like, that's like, to me, that's like, okay, that's a little sketch.
Yeah, I went to a conference in Florida several years back when I was involved at my church, and it was a pretty large conference, and there were people from all over the country there, churches from all over the country. And I remember that there was one church where the people were rolling up in a stretch Hummer that had like their name in gold leaf on the side. And I was like, it made me question me even being at that entire conference, at the fact that I was at the same conference they were at. And I did get a lot of information from that conference that I thought was pretty great. And I felt like the Spirit was moving there at times, but it made it hard for me to stay, to have them there, honestly. That is so the opposite. It's like, for example, looking at the Catholic Church and looking at the cathedrals, all the gold, everything, and all of that wealth that's just sitting there. I don't think that that's honoring God.
No.
Well, and then also, so like Landon one time, when we lived closer, took me, I think it was in Destrehan, there was this mansion on a corner. I mean, this thing was like, if it wasn't a city block, I don't know what to tell you. It was
Have a good night,
huge.
Hawk. Love you. Thanks for coming
And
by.
I was commenting at it because it was so large. I thought that it was like a retail or some sort of like business office. And Linda was like, no, that's the pastor's house. And I was
Not my pastor, but
no, not our pastor, but like I was just floored. And then also like even the not mega churches, even the kind of smaller churches, you know, like what used to be where your Sunday best to church has evolved into, you know, it's a makeup show, it's a fashion show. You know, we were told to
come as you are.
right, take no thought into what you're wearing.
Is life not more than food? Is life not more than clothes?
But they
Right,
will,
exactly.
you know, like some places, you know, will look down upon you if you are not dressed to the nines, and if you were, you know,
And I've certainly experienced that.
yep, so have I. And that's even from the pastors' wives. I mean, like, which that, you know, has been difficult because, you know, it's somebody you're supposed to look up to. And here they've got an Instagram account where they're making thousands and thousands every month selling clothes, you know, and it's like, I don't know here. What are we doing?
Not that we're, you know,
Clothes ought to be gave away. But what are you guys' opinion on Easter? While we're on the subject of God,
I think that the
no.
word Easter originates from the word Ishtar.
yes,
But that, you know, we've been, you know, so for like things like Christmas, it does say not to go and cut down a tree and to bring it in your house and adorn it with silver and gold. So like, you know, we broke that. We don't do that now,
Yep.
which makes us kind of seems extreme.
I don't
And
think so.
as far as Easter egg hunting, my kids do that like every day. They, you know, they're looking for duck eggs and chicken eggs. So,
I love it.
But it is reproductive kind of almost, I don't want to say a ritual, but like they've definitely Ishtar, or Estar, like
Goddess of fertility.
right. And the rabbits, you know, like rabbits reproduce quite frequently. And
Good to see you, Josh or Eli. I think that's probably Josh from Stuck in the Middle.
is it Josh or Eli? Yeah.
I think it's Josh. Thanks for coming
That's
by.
cool.
What up, Josh?
Hey,
Sorry,
Josh.
continue.
But you're right. I mean, the Easter. I mean, the rabbit is a symbol of fertility, and how do you put an Easter egg and a rabbit together, though? I mean, that's like combining a reptile.
Well, that's the whole, you know, esoteric, ritualistic, you know,
Exactly
part of it. And I think that, you know, fortunately or unfortunately, I fall into the resurrection day.
Yep.
We celebrate the resurrection, you know.
Yes, but the thing is, what I'm getting at is that what they done was they tried to take all the holy days away from us. That's why Easter is Easter. Ishtar, like you said, it came from a pagan goddess way back in the days of Samaria or whenever. That's where the name came from.
Right.
And they worshiped Ishtar.
I want to put this out here and say that if you know anything about church history, there's a particular reason why the calendar is set the way it is, and some of it has to do with the belief about how and whether you believe it or not, that's up to you, but of how the early church saw conception and obviously so those kind of stuff happens to where they also take it to as well. So sometimes people think, well, because of where we like, oh well, we do it with the spring equinox or whatever, and I think if you look at the calendar now, the way our calendar in the West is versus what the calendar was when Jesus was alive in Jerusalem, our calendar is off. The Gregorian calendar is off.
Yes, it is.
But but even with that aside, there is I do think there's a real reason why if you look at why they looked at those, and a lot of those things have to do with the significance of March 25th, the significance of why Christmas is on the day of the 25th in conjunction with the Annunciation of Christ and Mary and all that. So there's those things there. So I think that I do think that it's important to be honest about why we use those words. I myself don't like calling it Easter, but it's one of those things where it's like to me, like it's like Christmas. I know why we call it Christmas, and but I call it the Feast of the Nativity. I call, like what you just said, unspecified. I call it the Resurrection Sunday or Pascha Sunday, which is, Pascha is the lamb, and so like there are some reasons why it was done that have to do with beliefs that were held back then about how those things are done, that had to do more with beliefs about who Mary and Jesus and all that stuff had to do more than it had to do with some of the other stuff. But I do think there's no coincidence that the language bears that similarity to those other terminologies. I just want to put that out there because I think sometimes people go way too far and say, well, the whole reason why it's done that way was because of goddess worship of this, and I don't deny that doesn't have an implicit part that possibly inspired some things, but I do think there are some things based on the old Jewish customs and on the Jewish beliefs or the Hebrew beliefs that translated into the Christian church.
What I'm saying is that's why they chose the name Easter, which is Ishtar. That's all it is. They chose that to put in there because they are they're not of Christ. Let's put it like that.
Mm-hmm.
And so they put that in there. They're trying. It's confusion. Is what it is. They confuse everything.
But I think
Christmas.
I think you're right. I think that's true. I think that that we're finding and learning more and more, at least I am, that there's a lot of paganism and Satanism behind a lot of these religions, these holidays. But I also think that, I think that really it's the intention of your heart and what you're doing at those holidays. If you're celebrating Easter because you're worshiping Ishtar, then yeah, you're
even unknowingly.
Well, no, that's what I mean. I don't think that it matters if it's not knowing. I think it's the intention of your heart. So if like Christmas, probably Christ was not born on December 25th, but that's when I choose to celebrate and continue celebrating his birth because it marks a day that I can set aside to celebrate with, globally with brothers and sisters in Christ. So it doesn't matter to me if that's the accurate date or if that's, was that date was chosen for reasons that are nefarious. Or dark or evil, that's not what I'm worshiping for. That's not what I'm celebrating, even if that was the intention. And I think that maybe this is like a stupid analogy, but if you think of like Harry Potter, I think that like Voldemort, he couldn't understand love. I think it's the same kind of thing, honestly, with those powers that are behind tying these things into Satanism, into the devil and paganism. I think that they don't understand that our intentions and that God knows our heart independently. And so I don't really think that they can comprehend that it doesn't work to have it be on those dates or to try to infiltrate or, you know what I mean? Like sneak these things in under the radar. I don't think that it matters in the grand scheme of things.
Well, and I think it's important to be careful about those things because I don't want to disparage anyone's belief about what they think and how and where they come from, where they have. And I think it's important to have those conversations and to have it open and candid with respect. But it's kind of like, it's like some of my friends, like I've got a friend that's in the Seventh-day Adventist church. And to me, it's a bridge too far to say that the mark of the beast is anyone that worships on Sunday. I'm sorry, that's a bridge too far for me. I know why we worship on Sunday. It has to do with the resurrection of Jesus happening on Sunday.
People think the mark of the beast is worshiping on Sunday?
The Seventh-day Adventists do. Yeah, that's what Ellen G. White said. She was the founder of that church. So yeah.
Well, Sunday was, the day of worship was switched from Saturday to Sunday because Saturday was the last day of the week in the Old Testament. That's more or less, I think, what they're getting. I don't know about Seventh-day Adventists. I don't know anything about it.
Well, and you're right, Ronnie, because the Saturday is the seventh day, right? That's and so the reason why Christians started worshiping on Sunday was, one, it had to do with the celebration of Jesus' resurrection. And really, every time you go to church, you should be celebrating Jesus' resurrection. It shouldn't be just one day. And in fact, the church doesn't celebrate, the historical church doesn't celebrate Easter just on one day. They celebrate it for almost a month. And so until the season of when we look into Jesus's rising, when he goes up and ascends into heaven. But my point is that there's the other reason for that is it goes back to also there's a significance with the new Sunday being a first day, because we acknowledge that what Jesus did is he came and he fulfilled all of those laws. He fulfilled everything. And so now in Christ, that's why when he died, the curtain in the temple, it crushed. He did all those things. And so we are now living in a new, now some people don't like that. And that's a completely different topic because that's when you'll really know you'll get some really big pushback is when you talk about in those terms about especially savantism. I'm trying to remember what the word of the name of it is, but there's a theory about certain historical Christian traditions about that. But my point is that what I hopeful is that I want to acknowledge that there's a legitimate reason why the church started celebrating on Sundays. And again, I do think it's important that we acknowledge that Sunday is not the Sabbath day. And I don't think that some people say they switched on those days. Actually, a lot of the historical church went to church on Saturday and Sunday. But the significance was that is that Sunday is kept as a day for, especially in the historical church, is a day for when when communion was done. And
I only do know that that I don't remember which if it was Nero or Constantine, which one of the Roman emperors it was. They changed.
You're thinking of Constantinople. You're thinking
they worshiped the sun.
Yeah, because Nero was the emperor when Paul was alive, and he was the one that was persecuting Paul. So you're thinking of Constantine.
Hey, Kim.
I'm not an expert on it. I've read so many things about it all that it kind of gets jumbled up in my head. But I do know that one of them changed from Saturday to Sunday because they worshiped the sun. And at least the sun was one of their gods. I don't think
isn't Saturday Saturn's day, like Satan's day?
That's exactly what it's supposed to be. Yeah.
Saturnalia. I think I agree. The intention is very important, but this is just food for thought, because I also think that if you read, if you're reading in the Bible and you find things out, and our God does not change. So while there is the New Testament, Jesus did wash our sins away and we are forgiven. I think that, what God likes is what God likes. So, and I think also that there is such a thing as lesser magic. And I think that you can partake in rituals, whether you intend to or not, such as Easter. You are partaking in a ritual, and that can have an effect on your life, because God does give you freedom of choice. And so if you choose to partake in these things, he tells it, and I don't say this condemningly, because we just started not doing the tree, but because the Bible says, do not go cut down a tree and adorn it with, and bring it inside and adorn it with gold and silver. I don't want to do that, because I don't want, I know he wants what is good for me. And if that doesn't honor him, and then furthermore, if you look into the pagan side of how paganism,
or you just break down like Holly Day,
right,
and how that comes from, wizards and witches use wands, and the wood, the material that they use to make the wand comes from the holly tree.
And then what was the guy that was in the woods? Oh, I can't remember his name. I thought, but Christmas is it could also be, it's not
Krampus.
No. It was like a lowercase god. But then also, because you also look at things like Mardi Gras. Okay, Mardi Gras is always 2 weeks before Ash Wednesday, right?
No. It's usually the Tuesday before Ash Wednesday.
Mardi Gras. I know, but I'm saying
but the custom down in New Orleans, they celebrate it like a couple weeks out. But
we're in New Orleans.
So that's our culture.
Gotcha. Yeah,
we deal with it every year.
But I know that for most of what a lot of the Catholics do, the big day that they celebrate for Mardi Gras is the Tuesday before Ash Wednesday.
But if you've ever been to Mardi Gras, you'll see that.
Gotcha.
like
Gotcha.
every float is honoring like a fallen lowercase g, like a
Bacchus
Gotcha,
or
gotcha.
it's it's a Greek god or Zeus or
and for 2 weeks they do this. So like, yes, you're right. Fat Tuesday is technically the Tuesday.
Yeah, that's what I meant to say.
before
Fat Tuesday. Yeah, that's right. I'm sorry.
Ash
I misspoke.
Wednesday, but they started 2 weeks before that. You know what I mean? So it's 2 weeks of partying and drinking and debauchery. And then you go in on Ash Wednesday, and then you enter into Lent and do Easter and stuff like that. But it's like you were just celebrating with all these fallen, you know what I mean? Like honoring these huge floats to lowercase gods, and you know what I mean. And so like I do like intention is important, but ignorance is also not an excuse in my opinion.
That's
what
right.
I mean?
That's why I brought up the Easter and Christmas thing, is because whether you want to keep going along with it, it's up to the individual, and like Andy said, it's in the heart, however your heart feels, because God does know the heart. I agree with that, but at the same time, I think people ought to know about it, and make the decision from there.
Well, and I also think, did you want me to call you Mrs. Unspecified, or I don't know what the?
Oh yeah, that's fine. Or Tiff.
Okay. Oh, Tiff. Okay. I do think you make a valid point, and I think that's definitely good food for thought for anybody, is to not to be ignorant, because there's a lot of things that is in our culture. It's in our movies. There's a lot of things that I don't know about you guys, but I watched the Super Bowl while I was in the hospital, and I was like, this is just the display for Satanism was like, I've always kind of been like, oh, there's probably a little bit of Illuminati, maybe it's not, but like this last Super Bowl was like, yeah, they're like, they're unapologetic about it, but
it's in your face.
Yeah. Yep. But I will say that I do think it's important, because St. Paul tells us that we need to be careful, because there was a controversy with the Jews with how they were treating the Gentiles about them buying meat from the places where they were doing customs with that, where they were used for sacrifices. And I also, so I will say from a historical perspective, an analytical perspective, I think it's also important that as Gentiles, we understand that there was a specific law or custom or given to the Gentile. They were given to the people of Israel that were not given to Gentiles. For example, there's a lot of people out there who don't eat pork that I know are Christians, because they go, well, that's not what God. But I would say that my argument back on that would be that was because God was giving them he was trying to physically make them distinct, right? And we were talking about this already, Indy, you were saying it, that we're supposed to be distinguished. And so the whole thing now is that for us, it's not about not eating pork or being uncircumcised or whatever. It's about the fact that our hearts have been encountered with Jesus Christ and the Holy Spirit, and that outpouring of our love toward our neighbor should be the sign of what Jesus has done for us. So I would say that I think sometimes some of those verses that are in the Old Testament, because you were referencing Jeremiah, that I think it's it is the word of God, and it should be highly valued and read and research. But I also think that sometimes we may make a belief or a statement about something that's said to a specific group of people in the Bible that may not.
We're not speaking out of like hate or judging anyone.
No.
I
don't
in any Easter, you guys said, Christmas, Mardi Gras, or whatever. That it's a culture that we have. People in our lives that are trying to like get our kids to go, or like judging us for not being or partaking in this, and
they shouldn't do that.
We have children to teach what is and is not God's will, or what He wants, or His word at the very least. And so that when we speak from the position of teaching our children what we teach our children, essentially.
Well, and I think you're giving a good.
We're not judging anyone that does any debauchery or anything like that on Mardi Gras. Do you? That's God is a huge proponent for free will. That's why you have the free will you have. But we only mention things that like we just recently went over with our children, like, and the Mardi Gras being.
But I do think it's interesting because the Bible says, "Come out of her, my people, be not partakers of her sickness." What is it, baby?
Be not partakers of her sicknesses or her plagues, or her plagues or her sicknesses. And
in I guess it was in early 2020, we could see that like COVID was just. Oops, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to say it. The Wuhan Wiggle was just coming out to the United States, right? And so, but we knew, you know, with all of the gathering and stuff like that, we were like, I can see what's coming down the pipes. And down here, the kids get the whole week off for Mardi Gras. And so we pulled our kids out right before Mardi Gras, like of public school. That was when we started homeschooling, because we were like, you know what? We're not going to do it. And we can see that after Mardi Gras, come mark my words, 2 weeks after Mardi Gras, the Wuhan Wiggle is gonna explode down here. And sure enough, it did. But it's just interesting that be not partakers of her sicknesses and her plagues, and look at what happened, so I don't,
Vince, LSP put a real good question there in the chat just a few minutes ago about the 2012 Olympics. And man, I don't know if y'all saw that, but that was one of the most god awful demon worshiping things I've ever seen.
And I don't take what your guys are saying, because I think what you're doing is you're doing a good thing for people who are watching this right now or who watch it later. And same thing as what I'm doing, which is that you're articulating a position that's worth articulating, and then we're just having that back and forth so that we can reflect a fullness of different perspectives, so that people can hopefully read the Bible, make the best decision about what is right about that. Hopefully they're doing it within full context of the Bible and not cherry picking verses. Some people like to do that. I think we've all done that at one point.
We don't like to do that. We don't like to use verses as a brick. It's food.
Yeah.
So we try to come from a position of love, but in the midst of a conversation, when you only have so much time to speak on your end, it's like, you can only say what you can, so we're just trying to be respectful as far as
was that ceremony in 2012? Was that the one with the hospital beds and the big giant Grim Reaper? Was that 2012? Is that the one you're talking about? Yeah, that one was definitely.
Yeah, and the bull, where there's pulling the bull, and the girl was. I'm sorry.
Oh, I was saying hi to Kathy. Thanks for being
here.
Oh,
okay. There's a big old bull, there's and the girl in front of it was more or less saying her bow down and worship it, which she did. And you just had to see it. I mean, it's a long ceremony.
Oh yeah, but that's the one that was in 2022. They were talking about the opening to the Olympics back in 2012.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. Wasn't that in 2012 with the bull and all?
No, the bull just happened. That was in 2022 for the Commonwealth Games. That just happened like a few months ago.
Well, I was thinking I got them mixed up then.
Mm-hmm. But they're both. They're all run by the same people.
Yeah.
It's the same. It's the same.
Same spirit.
NOO. I don't want to say the other word that ends with bull and starts with ton.
2012.
The Ta bowl.
2012 was a major foreshadowing to the
COVID
event that happened in 2020, right?
Well, and I don't know about you guys,
people on hospital beds.
Are we not allowed to say it anymore? Is that a new YouTube thing? I can't keep up. Just talk.
I got a picture of it right here if you want me to pull it up.
Sure.
And then Salt and Light was saying, how about Brazil's carnival this year? Yeah, that was bad. We were showing a little bit of that on, but they were basically mocking Christ. They had, demons.
Yeah, it was blasphemy.
It was bad. It was bad.
I don't think I saw that, Salt.
It's pretty hardcore.
Brazil's carnival?
In Brazil. They've got whole floats that are just demonic. One is all out Satan. And then they've got, demons, they've got somebody dressed up as Jesus and demons attacking him and hitting him. And it's just terrible.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And shortly before that, which it was so interesting because Indy, the last one of the shows that we were talking about, dreams, and we had talked about, I had a dream about the Jesus statue in Brazil, and there was an earthquake and it had fallen apart, and a couple other people had dreams about that statue. And then later that week, I saw an article where Jesus.
It was the next day. I sent it to you the next day. I was like, no way.
Yeah, that was so crazy.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know about you guys.
It was struck by lightning. It was nuts.
Yeah, but I've been watching a lot of, I go to sometimes the thrift stores because I don't want to buy movies on the digital, because first one of the things I'm trying to get away from is just watching all the streaming stuff. I wonder if there's something in the technology of streaming personally that affects you. But so I've been getting these DVDs and stuff, and you watch some of these movies that come out like the last 15 years, and it feels like there's a lot of masks. I'm seeing a lot of masks. It's like, it's a lot of, I'm like, and is this just because I'm sensitive to it, or is it because they really were kind of predictive programming or preparing? I don't know. It's kind of crazy how you see all that.
Andy, thanks for having me up. I'm gonna go ahead and jump on down off here. I got a couple things I got to get done.
Later, brother.
Yeah, good
Take
night,
care,
Ronnie.
brother.
Good talking with you.
Take care, Ronnie.
Love you, Ronnie.
Bless
Thanks
you,
for
brother.
coming out.
You bet.
Happy
Y'all
night.
have a great one. Good night.
Hey, Base Girl. Thanks for being here. Is that true, Spike? The definition of Fauci is sickle? I had not heard that.
Whoa.
Here's that picture, Indy, if you want to pull it up of the Olympics opening
Yeah, let me
ceremony.
put it in.
There it
My
is.
computer is being
It's
kind
a
of
derived from
slow.
the Sicilian word for sickle.
And look at
Wow.
all these beds, hospital beds, nurses. The
Yep.
ones in black, I think are like the graphene coming to wrap the people up.
Maybe.
And maybe carry them away, because it's kind of like Mary Poppins. Carry their souls off to heaven. I don't know, bro. It's just trippy. This shouldn't be a fucking Olympics ceremony, though.
Like, what was their, what did they, I mean, I don't know. What did people think was the intention behind having this at the Olympics? Like, why would this be portrayed at the Olympics?
Who
You know
knows?
what I mean?
Yeah, just like, I mean, they just do it and
Yeah,
they just
I
make
like
it look
that
cool. You
stuff.
know, I mean, people don't really put a lot of thought into anything, really.
Yeah.
You know how much codes
Interesting.
and shit that they slip by us and stuff, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Subliminal messaging, all kinds of hand gestures, hand signals, colors. I mean, there's certain things they do where they communicate to each other, and the common man is oblivious. And this is
I
one
talked to
of them.
someone that talked
Have a good
about the
night, Blaine.
rappers.
Thanks.
It's like the reason why they're so animated with their hand gestures when they're doing a lot of like the Illuminati rap kind of stuff is that they're actually casting spells on people.
Well, something, bro. I mean, I
Oh,
don't
Mary
trust
Poppins? Is
anybody.
that what it's supposed to be? Huh, I don't know. Hey, Eli, thanks for stopping by. Chimney sweeps. Okay. Sure.
Yeah, it's wild, man. This whole
Mm-hmm.
But that's crazy that I just looked that up, that the Fauci surname is sickle. Man, that's insane.
Yeah, that is pretty crazy. I had no idea. Yeah, a minute detail. Glad that you're here. Yeah, what's happening in Turkey is just crazy. I haven't heard anything in the last few days. Has anybody heard any updates? I mean, have there been any more earthquakes? I know there were quite a few.
No, but I was sharing an article the last week when we went live that like, like
Hey, Matt.
other countries are way more open. Like one what was it? She was like a governor or something in Turkey, and she just came right out and was like, I think that HARP is responsible for the earthquake. I think this was man-made. Like, I don't know.
You guys got to realize we're pretty much the bad guys.
I
know it's a hard thing to say.
We are not
the United States establishment is
our
what
government, the people who are running our government right now, just like the people running the government all around the globe. Because really, it comes down to the free people with God-given rights and everyone who's going to try to enslave us.
Right.
It's, these borders are, they're really meaningless in a lot of ways. I mean, I know that's a touchy subject right now because of our border. I mean, we need to have security, but that, you understand what I'm saying. I mean, we talked about, like, as Christians, for those of us who are, and even if you're not, and you just believe in a more, a moral, value to life, human life, then we're all on the same side. And it's not the side of the people who have the power in government globally.
Right.
What I want to ask, Big Chap, is if you've seen that thing that NASA's been saying the last couple of days about the asteroid hitting us, and it's kind of like they're like, it's like what was it? It's like we got a 1 in 600 chance of colliding with Earth.
Yeah.
And I feel like they're trying to just between that and the UFO stuff, I really think they're trying to
it's the whole
prepare us for something big.
Yeah, look over here while we do all this shit over here. You know what you haven't heard about is all the people on Jeffrey's flight logs. You haven't heard much anymore about all the classified documents Biden was hiding. You haven't heard there's so many there's a list of shit I could go down that we stopped hearing about. And they just bring up, I don't believe it, bro, because I don't believe the earth is round. But that's another podcast.
Well, the interview that we just listened to, I can try and share it somehow, either in private chat or on the main chat or whatever. If you want to show it, I don't know. But this guy predicted.
What is it, Lyndon?
If I tell you it was so hard for me to find.
If I tell you, it's gonna sound crazy, but if you just listen,
the dude predicted the pandemic. Let's say, you know what I mean.
This was in the 80s.
And specifically that it would be essentially an exaggerated version of the flu, and he predicted that 2017, 2018. He was only off by like a few months.
Is this Ed Gacy?
No, it's Stevens or something. Stevens interview. I'll look up the.
Yeah, pull it up
Here.
Give me the puppy.
This little baby.
Don't you growl at me. Don't you growl at me.
Actually, John does have a channel.
I'm grabbing him.
Got an awesome channel.
Yeah, all these guys up on panel have a great channels. If you're not subbed, you're missing out. Hey, Dank, good to see you.
Got it.
Speaking of awesome channel.
If you're talking about me, Ashley B, yes, I do. It's at the Oak Enclave.
Yeah, I'm grabbing it. Hang on. I'm all slow.
The Dank Crusader. What's up, brother?
I don't know, man. I'm gonna continue doing what I'm doing as far as
and it's good what you're doing, man.
Keeping God close to me, keeping my kids safe and within my control, basically, as far as not getting far from them.
And that goes back to what Indy was saying too, is that what's specified and Tiff are doing is that you start with your family, you start with your kids, you teach them right, you protect them, and that's part of what you got to do as a parent is protect them from all these nefarious things, and realize what they're sourced in, and so you're doing right on that. And I'm glad you're saying the things that you're saying, Big Chap, because I think a lot of people, especially when it comes to the other issue that you just discussed, glaze over the fact that the Bible talks about those things, Yeah. Like confirming it and all that stuff.
Yeah, for sure.
Right.
Yeah.
That's all he talks about is handiwork. That's why it's called a plane. That's why the Arctic Circle is called an Arctic Circle, because it's a circle around it's an ice wall around our plane, our space.
I definitely think that's a possibility. Big Chap, can you open up the link that Landon and Tiff shared in the private chat and share your screen? I think it's going to go better than me trying to share something while I'm streaming.
It sounds a little fantastical, right? And there are like, I guess, half truths and truths involved. Like instead of calling it Project Bluebeam, he calls it Project Skybeam, or he alludes to. He doesn't say that it was MK Ultra, but the techniques that they used on him, if you know anything about MK Ultra, are absolutely MK.
Right.
So it's just. It's a little long, I guess, but especially
14 minutes ain't that bad.
Well, I mean, I
It's
don't know.
interesting. It's an interesting 14 minutes, and you don't have to agree with him, but it's interesting, and it's definitely subjects worth discussing.
All right. Well, I'm going to mute my mic so it doesn't echo.
That makes it academic in my book.
All right.
All right, I'm going to mute too. Let me put this in. You want to make it big screen, chap? There we go.
I'm not hearing anything.
Yeah, we're not getting any sound, big chap. It's probably that thing you have to hit when you share it. Give us a second here. Technical difficulties. Thank you for doing that, big chap. I appreciate it. Yeah, Kim, I think that what a lot of people who believe in flat Earth think is that there's the glass itself or the camera lenses are fisheye. So in a plane, if you're flying, for example, then those windows are bowed out, and we're told that's something to do with the cabin pressure, but it also gives the effect of making the horizon look rounder than it is. And then also with like cameras that we're from the space shuttles or whatever, it's that they have the fisheye lens usually on.
Right.
I am still undecided on flat Earth, but I've heard enough about it that I have a lot of questions. I don't know. To me, I feel like my focus is on other issues, so it's not something that I feel like I have to figure out right now. But it's interesting.
We don't let it divide.
It's a distraction because the Bible says it's a footstool.
Then to say that it's a distraction doesn't make it true or untrue.
Right, exactly.
You know what I mean? So,
but it just doesn't matter whether it's a donut, whether it's
to say it doesn't matter is to undersell it, because it's a monumental way to hide God
that we don't know
from masses of people. If you think that you're spinning 1,000 miles an hour, 666,000 miles per hour orbiting the sun, but really what you're experiencing is more true. You know what I mean? That you're not. Do you feel like you're spending 1,000 miles an hour? And then they're going to start saying that Einstein relativity and all that. And I'm not trying to get into it, but because I see both sides. But if they can convince you that you're going through an endless black void of nothingness forever, that puts you kind of far away from the throne room, which the Bible teaches that there are 3 heavens where the fowls fly. There's the second heaven, and then there's the throne. There's heaven that, and that's where we'll leave that. But
that's true. And then also it is kind of one of, now that you mention it like that, it is kind of one of the foundational things that you're taught in school.
Right.
So it
and there's predictive programming in every Universal movie where they start out with the globe.
Yeah.
And
for me, I think the big issue to me is I think you can have any perspective on it, but I think if you start thinking and you start taking like the Carl Sagan approach of thinking we're just a pale blue dot, and you don't look at we're just another ball in a massive space of other empty space, and it makes you feel like God is at the center in the creation, and it lessens the creation. That's when I have an issue with it, of any kind of thing that or theory or scientific belief that we put out there, is when it lessens what God's creation is. That's when I get concerned.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think it's kind of like what you're saying. I think if it's not true that the Earth is a globe, then that's like an ultimate gaslighting that happens from, birth on. And if that's not true, but we all are, have bought into it, then it puts us on rocky footing for anything that we believe.
Right. And that's where cognitive dissonance comes in, because it's like, whoa, so you're telling me everything is up for debate?
Right. I like how you said it's salt. She said flat Earth is not a salvation issue, but it's worthy of investigation because of the why. Exactly. That's how I feel about it too.
Yeah.
I will say this, nobody who believes in flat earth does so just because it's it is not an easy viewpoint to have. Like, people have to do a lot. Everybody, I think, initially looks into it as like a rolling your eyes, oh my gosh, you've got to be kidding me. And then the more they look into it, the more they're like, oh, come to think of it, yeah, I suppose that does happen or is true or what. It's never something anybody intends to, what? I think I'm going to go be a flat earther, Nope,
Right.
that's not fun.
Well, and I think that's the key thing on all of this is there are people who have that automatic, like they're programmed. It's like they completely disregard anything, and it's weird, and that's where I think is the interesting issue. Because when I would explore it, I would talk to friends about it, and they'd be like, "Are you kidding me?" And it's like, so why is this such an absurd thing? And I think you got to be careful when you start thinking that whenever you hear something and you say, "Oh, you got to be kidding me," because that's what people do towards God. Are you kidding me? You believe in a God? Oh, you kidding me? You believe in creation? You believe in, like, when you start, to me, whether you believe in 6 day, 6 day, 7 day little creation, or whether you believe without, when you start just on the surface before you're even able to conversate about it, when you start to dismiss it because you have an already built-in predisposition about it or bias about it, then that's the issue. Is can you be open about it and still affirm your position? That's good. Iron sharpens iron.
Mm-hmm. What did you say, Big Chap? Sorry, I think
I told Clay to take it easy. He's bouncing out.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, Clay, thank you so much for coming by. Always love to see you.
The reason why
play sometime soon.
The reason why they went to the heliocentric model is because they want to keep God and the Creator out of our minds and thoughts. If they can lock us onto a ball spinning around with limited resources, and what's in this little ball is all we ever have, and there's no other way to get more, like over the ice wall and the outer spaces, right? I believe extraterrestrials are called extraterrestrials because they come from an extra terra, which means earth, extra land. They're not extra celestials. They're not coming from a celestial realm.
Even Jesus said that his kingdom was not of this world. So, let's say like a fallen angel is not of this world. You see, it fell. You see, so like there's a direct correlation to that deception, in my opinion. Aliens, little green men, little gray men, are essentially, how do you say this? Kind of, I mean, you're going to hear me say demons, right? But fallen angels.
Yep, they are. I agree 100%.
That but they're also, it's a half truth, you see. So they're saying we are alien, that we're not of this world, and technically it's right.
Are we going to watch that interview? Because he talks about this too some.
Yeah, are you ready?
I'm trying right now if this damn thing works, yo.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to add pressure.
No pressure.
Oh, you're
See
good.
if the sound goes.
It should be working now, right? I'm gonna rewind it.
My name is Joseph Spencer.
Yep.
From May 1970 to October 1997, I served the United States government as a top secret operative, but not in a category that is commonly known or understood. I was known as a man in black. Following 7 years acting as a counterintelligence agent for the CIA, I was recruited for a new assignment that entailed working within above top secret operations. I was aware of the black budget projects, but never knew the context of them due to their high level of secrecy. Even the president was denied access to their inner workings. Annually, billions of dollars are poured into black projects, which operate without any supervision or intrusion. They have full autonomy. The operations deal primarily with advancing military technologies, most of which have been reverse engineered from recovered alien spacecrafts that had either crashed or were shot down by our military. The public, sadly, will never, ever have knowledge of these operations. This transition in my life happened in 1970. The senior black project director was William T. Latham, who had worked under CIA Executive Director Richard Schlesinger. Latham stated that I was the perfect candidate for my new position. I was a foster child, and I had no connections to existing relatives. I had no friends or social life. It was easy for them to erase my past and provide me with a new identity. I gave myself to them as a priest would to his God. But first, my mind had to be erased. I was injected with various forms of mind-altering drugs: LSD, heroin, mescaline, morphine, sodium pentothal, and more. Drug-induced hypnosis followed with antegrade and retrograde amnesia. The goal was to program me to do two things: kill and forget. After 9 months of programming, I had become a man in black. What I later discovered was that not all the men in black were human. About a third were alien hybrids. Their distinctive feature was the absence of whites in their eyes, giving the impression of empty eye sockets. This unsettled me, and it took months to adjust to the reality of alien integration. My assignments largely dealt with UFO sightings and crash sites. In August of 1971, I witnessed my first UFO crash site just north of Edwards Air Force Base in California. Inside the craft were three gray humanoids, two dead, one still alive. Also in the craft was a human female abductee. The alien humanoids were transported to the base. The two witnesses had arrived before us and took several photographs. The first surrendered his camera, but the second fled. When we apprehended him, he resisted, and I was ordered to silence him, which I did. The killing of witnesses was executed with a wand that acted very much like today's taser, with the voltage from the wand cause immediate cardiac arrest, and the victim's death would be attributed to natural causes. We silenced countless victims, not only men, but women of all ages and even teenagers. The following day, after each kill, our memories were reset, so we would have no recollection of the murders. A good majority of the victims were ufologists and whistleblowers. Among the ufologists I personally silenced were Paul William Cooper, Milton Begay, Claude Monroe, Anthony Vargas, and noted documentarian Samantha Willis. When my wand malfunctioned with Samantha, I resorted to strangulation. She fought for her life for almost 2 minutes. In recalling this act, I stared into her pleading eyes for the entire duration with absolutely no remorse, guilt, or feelings. That was how effective the mind conditioning was. And it's her face that haunts my dreams more than anyone's to this day.
So they stuffed out a documentarian.
Yep.
Well, that's not good to hear.
Mm-hmm. All right, we're going to move on. In 1954, Dwight Eisenhower signed what's known as the Granada Treaty with the alien gray race. In exchange for shared alien technologies, the Greys were allowed to abduct a number of humans annually for medical examination. The Greys also demanded anonymity from the public. A short time later, human technology took a giant leap forward with circuit chips, fiber optics, and lasers. The Granada Treaty is still active today, but the number of human abductions has increased despite objections from the world governments. Now, the really interesting part. Every year, at least 8 million children go missing in the world. I can attest that 1/3 of them are abducted by government operatives and transported to any one of the 1,477 underground military installations on the planet, then imprisoned for the remainder of their lives. The children are subjected to biological and genetic experiments, dissections, and mutilations performed not by human scientists, but an alien gray species. During my stay at the Vanguard Underground Base north of Phoenix, Arizona, I witnessed many of these procedures. Because there was no form of anesthesia administered to the young patients, the halls reverberated with the screams of tortured children from morning to night. The ones that perished were incinerated in the installation's crematoriums. My point of contact at this base was Lieutenant Colonel Charles T. Leninger, and he was a human alien hybrid. And get ready for this. In 1994, the World Population Summit in Cairo, Egypt, had 160 nations participate, where they all agreed that the human population was out of control and must be stopped because the world is running out of resources. An agreement was formed that would mandate the reduction of humans from 6 billion to 800 million by the year 2030. This meant finding a method or methods to wipe out nearly 95% of the population. Solutions were discovered, investigated, tested, then created, and have been in full force since. The procedures have been inflicted onto the human race are as follows. 1. Toxic levels of chemically enhanced fluoride have been secretly added to our drinking water over the last 20 years in every city and community on the planet. I personally oversaw the delivery of fluoride barrels to Denver, Chicago, Tampa, and Minneapolis water departments. The adverse effects of fluoride poisoning to the human body are numerous and debilitating. The effects to children is damage to their neurological development, among other serious ailments. 2. Man-made viruses and diseases. The AIDS virus, which was a designer byproduct of the American Disease Institute, was distributed through vaccines to the public in 1980. Instituted as a preliminary population control tactic, the results were successful and led to more lab-produced viruses that have since been unleashed onto the public. Among those is the development of a mutated version of the common flu to replicate the 1918 influenza pandemic that killed 40 million people. The first strain of this new flu virus will be released to the public in late 2017. So if we see a flu outbreak in the late 2017 or early 2018 that's killing people, we'll know this is true. All right. 3. Killing us from the air with neurotoxins, barium chloride, cancer microbes, and viruses by way of chemtrails. Released into the skies daily over all inhabited regions by military aircrafts. The effects of these toxins are severe and over time lethal, causing respiratory ailments, cancer, damage to the immune systems, and sterilization in men. Since the chemtrail plan was implemented, sperm count in men has dropped nearly 50%. If this isn't reversed soon, the human race will face early extinction. Now the grand finale. This is some scary shit. In March 1997, an event known as the Phoenix Lights became the most infamous UFO sighting in history. A mile-wide vessel, clearly not man-made, flew slowly and silently over the state of Arizona and was witnessed by 10,000 people, including the governor of Arizona. To date, there has been no reasonable explanation. But for every witness interviewed, the craft was as real as anything they'd ever seen. Their lives were transformed. They now believe that we truly are not alone. However, there is another truth, for I know what they really saw. 1986, while stationed at an underground installation near Boulder, Colorado, I was introduced to Project Skybeam by Lieutenant General Andrew Garris. I was then led down a corridor and into a large hangar where a stealth bomber hovered only 20 feet above me. I stood there confused, and Garris looked over me and smiled, then asked if I was certain of what I was seeing. I replied, of course. What else could it be? I was then shocked to find out that this wasn't a real craft. It was a projected hologram. Since the early 1950s, scientists have been developing holographic technology, and over the years improved it to a state that we can only imagine. As I stood there staring at the bomber, which looked so absolutely real and solid that I could reach up and touch it, I contemplated the possibilities. What if this projection was 1,000 feet up in the sky? How would anyone know that that was an illusion? The Phoenix Lights craft, witnessed by 10,000 people, was the first grand-scale skybeam test upon the public. It succeeded beyond expectations. In October 1938, Orson Welles unleashed his War of the Worlds radio broadcast to the American public. It was so realistically portrayed Vast portions of the population went into panic. Terrified citizens scrambled to evacuate their cities in droves. America had been easily tricked by very simple means. To amplify this response, those who are truly in power of not only our country, but all the countries on the planet, and who are the true purveyors of the depopulation process, have formulated the final stage of their sinister plan. In the year 2024, a global event will alter the course of mankind's future. The world will stand witness to a massive alien invasion. Thousands of projected holographic alien warships will blanket the skies, sending people into a global panic. Real military crafts within the holograms will inflict actual damage to the surrounding areas to sell the gimmick. And as a result of the ensuing human chaos, a one world government will immediately form without any resistance from the people. They will be the new world order. Once this happens, we as a people will be doomed to enslavement and accelerated depopulation. With that said, the only hope for human salvation is to acquire and spread the knowledge of these activities and agendas. Resist, retaliate, and conquer this imposing enemy. The time is now, as humanity is rapidly approaching its final days.
Okay, so do I believe 100?
What year was that?
It's not done yet. I don't know.
Oh,
Let me look and see what year. It was uploaded to YouTube 3 years ago. I think it said
The knowledge of what's coming is taking its toll on me. I see all these people living their lives, enjoying themselves, planning their futures. I'm oblivious to the fact that it's all going to end soon. Here I am at a park where children are playing, and in the skies above, I can see the chemtrails poisoning the air and slowly killing us all in plain sight. I've never felt so helpless. I want to scream out to the world, but I'd only be laughed at, ridiculed. When Claire said the memoirs were a fabrication, I secretly wish she was right. Then I could sleep at night. But I know, beyond a reasonable doubt, that it's all true. That Joe was being completely forthright. I saw it in his eyes. I heard the tremor in his voice when he spoke about it. It didn't come off as an admission. It was more of a deeply concerned confession. He was scared for us all. And that says a lot, coming from a man who was a government assassin.
Huh.
According to IMDb, that documentary came out in 2018. It's called Alien Overlords.
Do I believe 100% of what he said? No, there's a couple of things that don't make sense. But the Project Skybeam, which I've always known as Project Bluebeam, and the what's to come type stuff, yeah, that seems pretty spot on with what I was expecting.
mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think he's right about obviously the pandemic is the first thing, and then I think the UFOs, that they are, to me, regardless of what anyone thinks, or everyone's entitled to their view, but to me, you have to say there is something that this is sketch when the government that has been denying UFOs existence for over so many years, 50 years, all of a sudden now says it. You have like a Pentagon guy, last month saying, it could be that, like,
Right.
Right.
and they're putting out they're now putting out files, and they're putting out stuff, and they're putting out like whistleblower status for people. I mean, this to me is a psyop that they're beginning, because to me, only if you have a global fear, and that's why I've always said
Well,
There's
think
a
about the predictive programming. I mean,
Yeah.
how many UFO movies are? I mean, how big did Independence Day get? I mean, like that.
We've been laying it
Essentially,
out for a long time. Here's what I've been saying for forever, bro. And he mentioned it with Project, what he called it, Skybeam, but the holograms on Project Bluebeam. I've said this and said this and said this. What they're gonna do is project a fleet of alien ships, but instead of them being alien ships, it'll be predator drones inside each hologram, and there'll be like, 20 guys with remote controllers and headgear on the side that's controlling the holograms, and basically the hologram and the predator drone move as one unit. So you're looking up at the sky seeing a fucking alien ship, and all of a sudden, boom, there goes this house that's on the gun registry list because he's got 22 guns and shit.
Well, and another movie that was predictive programming for that was Spider-Man: Far From Home, with the way that Mysterio, whatever that guy's name is, where he has all the projected.
That's right.
Yeah. So,
I mean, that's right there in your face. I mean,
they have to tell you before they do it.
Right.
Yep, they do.
Part of the lesson.
Part of the rule.
So
right,
anyway.
because you have free will, and essentially, if you accept it, and you're not,
Well, and I think that's why we
giving
have
them your permission.
Yeah, and I think that's why we have different, what I call additions or different protocols are part of the simulation. I say there's a lot of things that are simulated, and these smaller simulations are beginning to prepare us for the final simulation. And there will be a point in time, I think, that this massive thing is going to make people, because you have to think what would give, we saw how much people were willing to give up in the fear with what happened 3 years ago with the flu, and that's what I'll say. And you also can tell that this will be amplified, because when you start thinking there's a UFO right in your, right in front of your house or whatever, you're going to want to run to a protected government security housing facility, and that's what they want you to do. And I think, and I do believe the sterilization is happening. I mean, the birth rates now are like at all-time low in recorded human history.
Tiff's been tracking that for years.
Yeah. The stuff that's with, the sterilizations and it's in the food and it's all there. And I think part of the reason why some of the things that are happening in the simulation are because of like weather weapons. They are because of, remember like that earthquake that happened in California a few years back, where it happened right next to that advanced naval weapons facility. Do you really think that's a coincidence?
Right.
But, and then I think with some of these simulations, I think it's preparing for this step where people will just completely be afraid. Mass hysteria will be in order, and then they'll have to call the chaos. And you'll either have to then find a place to go, or you will have to run, or you'll have to just accept things and either die or submit and be a slave. I mean, those are really what's going to happen, I think.
There's 25 people in the chat. Here's a little remedy for anything that's flying above you, or for anything that's like a surveillance camera, and they're cheap. I got one. I got two more I want to get, one for each one of my oldest kids. I think the more you have as far as a family, the better you'll be. But check this out. Is Indy still here?
Yep.
All right. Can you see this?
Yeah.
I've been wanting one of those.
Oh yeah.
I know. You want to.
I have one, bro, and they work like a charm. They go so far, and you can literally tune it in to look like this. So imagine you got three of these. Your kids got one, your wife's got one, and you got one. And an alien ship flies up on you, and you hit it with all these different patterns.
It affects its visual sensor, and it's
right. And whoever's managing that predator drone in there, he's either got to crash it or land it. You know what I mean?
But you don't think that if it were, let's just say hypothetically, not to, we're not trying to fear monger or anything, so I just want to say that outright.
No,
But-
because those in Christ have no reason to fear.
Yeah, we don't fear. We
Exactly.
find them.
Because God will take care of us, and he is a way maker, and if you're relying on him, he will make a way. But like you mentioned immediately, so we can't necessarily beat the sensors, the technology, like heat sensors, whatever, IR sensors, whatever, in these drones. But a lot of folks think that they can beat the operators of the sensors. Now, let's say they flip the script on you, and these drones are not operated by people, okay, and that it's operated by let's say software, audio,
Algorithm.
An advanced algorithm.
artificial intelligence or whatever, and my thought to that is okay, so you take out its visual sensors, it can't track your heat or it can't see you per se, but it still pings right there where it saw, you know what I mean, or where it, so I don't know. You really need to rely on God, and the only way to him is through his son Jesus. And
I'll be rebuking it and praying at it and shining
I was
the
gonna say-
laser and shooting at
that's
it.
right, I'm praying.
This is a good remedy for flying or holograms or flying, whatever. But if anybody that's ever, anything from night terrors to abductions, all you need is the name of
The
Jesus.
name of Jesus.
Mhm.
Oh yeah.
But
Amen.
I do want
If,
one of those, and I would rather have one than not have
Yeah.
one.
Yeah.
Right.
Plus, they're fun to play with. They charge on a USB, so you never have to worry about getting batteries and shit for them. I mean, they're cool as hell. They go forever. So on the straight beams, they go forever. All of my my optics on my guns are all green laser too, for that reason. Because something about the green laser will knock out the sensor in a monitoring system, and it makes it to where it fucks up the recording.
Hey, Northern Girl Hobbies, glad that you're here. Do you
I'm
know
gonna drop,
something we don't know, or are you just talking about like what Big Chap was sharing about it being part of Project Bluebeam?
I'll drop the link right here to that laser.
Yes.
That's hilarious.
Yes.
Yes, because I appreciate you sharing that.
Mhm.
I'm laughing at Kelly says, please don't use it as a cat toy. And it says, although an AR won't hurt your chances either.
Right.
Well, that's why I bought all double lot for my 12 gauge, bro. That's 9 pellets.
And by the way,
six
can I
of 'em.
recommend as a good precaution, if something happens and you have to evacuate where you're living at, please, first of all, invest in getting an atlas.
Learn to use it.
Yeah.
And learn how to
Don't
use
bring
it.
your phone.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And the other thing too is learn the major roads and and avoid them, like especially the interstates.
Amen. That's right.
I've seen where I live where quote unquote fires, because there's been some suspicion about some of the fires that we've had here in recent years, where it shut down the interstate. And when it shut down the interstate, you couldn't get in or out. And so I have, thankfully I live on the outskirts of town. I live out in the country, and I have the ability just to get going on the highway and poosh, but yeah, that's important stuff to
Real
know
quick,
your evacuation plan if you're going to figure that out.
if I can touch on the whole leaving your phone thing, of course, a lot of people aren't going to want to do it because of the information that it holds. And there's not a whole lot that I can do about the information. You can have little screens and backup hard drives that plug up to the screens and allow you to access the information on those hard drives. But put all that away. A simple thing that you could do to if you ever were in a situation where you had to leave your phone, behind, print your pictures out now.
Yeah.
And like John was saying earlier about how you're watching DVDs and whatnot. We've been on that kick for about a year and a half now, where me and my family we be going to thrift stores and Goodwill, and
me too.
We bargain hunting, and it's only 25-50 cents for a VHS, and I like the old school quality. I like seeing it how I saw it when I grew up.
Yep.
And so we stacked up on VHSs because they're only 25-50 cents. We can ball hard,
And if you go to yard sales where people really just want to get rid of it, you can get a good TV.
Yeah, we got an
combo
awesome
for like $10. Now, if you go and try to find it on eBay, it's like $300.
No, I've seen the TV that we found at a garage sale or a yard sale on Amazon for over $500, and it's a VHS DVD player.
But if
TV.
but that's because they're willing to wait. I think if you're willing, if you're at a yard,
you gotta
if you're at
go
a
to those yard
sale,
sales.
Yep.
Got to get thrifty,
That's
because there are so many things that we get at yard sales or Goodwill or thrift stores, and we repurpose them for different things, especially for your chicken farmers or your goat farmers out there.
That's right.
Because like you were saying earlier, it's so expensive to maintain taking care of these animals and whatnot. But there are also cheap alternatives where, if you're creative enough, you don't have to get a $25 this or that, or a $30, $40 this and that, there's a good,
For instance, look, Landon has PC. Well, I don't want to say PCP because that's
it's a pre-charged pneumatic, but essentially it's a very overpowered, glorified pellet rifle, right? Okay, but it has fed us, right? And that's just for us.
Is downplaying it massively. If you are a Second Amendment advocate and you can see that they are definitely coming after that, they're not coming after air guns right now, and it's
highly unregulated.
They have some game.
Right. The technology at this point has stepped up. They
have air gun rifles that can take down deer,
and bigger,
bigger. But all I'm saying is it's a valid option, and it's just like the good old days. They can come straight to your door if you order it.
Like the good old days, you could order, fully automatic Thompson 45 out of a Sears magazine.
That's right. And it's a little quiet.
Not that you can do that these days. I'm saying that, we've hunted squirrel. We're expanding our horizons as far as what we're willing to eat. If you've watched our show, we did a little thing at the end of the last show or a couple of shows back where we were talking about we catch snapping turtle, and you wouldn't believe how good snapping turtle is.
I can believe it.
Or squirrel or rabbit, and you heard us mention earlier about how we've been trying to focus on getting out of the grocery store as much as possible. We're trying to get some of our goats into milk so that we can start making our own, whatever, cheese, butter, farmers cheese, soap,
Yep.
And with God, there is a way. This is possible, and
but you're gonna have to fledge. You're gonna have to fleece. I mean, that's not what I said. I meant to say fleece. You're gonna have to fleece some of those comforts that you're used to.
That's right. That's right.
Because again, that's the question.
But if you are on the walk, then you understand denying yourself here, and
exactly.
So and that's just a part of it. It just kind of goes further, where it's like,
Like I do cold showers because they've actually helped me lose a lot of weight, and they've been very good for recuperating my muscles and stuff. But so I have no qualms, if I don't have a hot shower, and so
I do a hot cold thing where it's cold at first and then it gets hot. It's weird, but
Annie's asking if you guys know, where can you get air guns?
So I personally have used, and this isn't like it sounds like a grift or an advertisement, but personally, I've done my own shopping at Pyramid Air, which of course there's symbology right off
Midway USA.
Midway USA has some air guns. There's Air Gun Depot. One of the coolest places that I just found, I forgot the name. I think it's AEA. I forgot the name right off the top of my head.
Kelly says she likes your hat.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you, Kelly. I got that for him.
But
and then Spike said, "Aren't there high-powered air rifles that take buckshot?" I think
there are air rifles that are we still talking about? Yeah, air rifles.
Yeah.
There are air rifles that shoot arrows as fast or faster than crossbows, and that's a new innovative thing that I'm looking to get into. I think that's really cool. But at the base of it, I'm still focused on sustainability. So with these air rifles comes pellets. And if I don't stock up on having, thousands of pellets, then
which is more easy. Like
it's easier and cheaper to do than it is ammo. But but my main point is, like, I would like to hone in on what bushcrafting that I can do or teach my son. Like, we need to be able to make our own spears, arrows, bows, and to simplify and, to open up so if you're praying for food in a survival situation, a true survival situation, and you come across a possum, well, you can't thumb your nose up at the possum.
Right.
You know what I mean? So, I mean, in my opinion,
Hey, Silver Girl, good to see you here. Thanks for coming by.
One of my other favorite things is that, like, not all of them, okay, they have to be suppressed, but like there are some that are pretty quiet. Like,
well, that's the thing, is that because they're not firearms, they can have a shusher. You know what I'm saying? And
a shusher.
Yeah. Which makes them, they call it in the industry, backyard friendly, so that allows you to get your target practice in. And then if you sprinkle some corn out in a spot, you know what I mean? You can conveniently, test out what you're willing to eat,
Right, Northern Girl Hobbies. You should sub to that's Unspecified Podcast and Review, Landon and Tiff.
Oh, that's
I'll get their link.
Landon, okay, it's good to know your name, Landon.
Yeah, sorry about that. Not trying to be.
No, it's okay.
It's Landon and Tiff, and that's our real names.
Right.
We're not trying to be like
unspecified.
Unspecified. Well, and that means more or less to the topic of what we might be talking about, even though the algorithm has like made it to where it's like, no, you will be specific. Like they're like, you can do only one thing. Like, you can't just do whatever you want.
Right.
But the point I was trying to make is that, like, so targets can be expensive, but like you can go to Goodwill and get some old, like, heavy duty pots and pans for $2-3 and make a target.
Which is what we did.
Well, and we have a local thrift store here, and they on Saturdays it's 50% off. So I try to go first thing in the morning. Because it gets busy on that.
Before all the good stuff gets got.
Yeah.
I know what that's about.
Yeah, but sometimes I go like early in the week too, because that's when they start. Someone might come in on a Friday or on a Monday, and it's usually out on the stock. But yeah, so and I try to use our we have Goodwill, and we have what we call it's called an ARC store, and it's a Colorado-based chain thing. But I prefer the one because they tend to have less of their profits go to them and more to the charity of whatever they're helping out. But I like it because I get a lot of good treasures. I mean, there's a lot of things that I have found both on DVDs and VHSs. And by the way, if anybody knows, if anyone has like a far off place on VHS, I am willing to pay top dollar for that.
What was that?
A far off place. I love that.
A far off place. Yes. It never got ported into DVD. Yeah. I know, Indy, you would know it because you're my age, and that movie came out when we were like 12 and 13. It's like
right.
Never heard of it.
Yeah,
I'll have to go look.
It's back when Disney did a movie about poaching, and now it just offends so many people right now. That's probably why they haven't put it on even on Disney Plus. You can't. It's only on VHS.
Hey, Ghost, good to see you.
Whatever you do, don't watch Old Yeller, man. It's sad.
Hey, no spoilers for like the 30-year-old movie.
Pretty sad at the end.
Yeah, thank you, Dragon Slayer or A Minute Detail, for doing some other places to get those air rifles. That's awesome. Yeah, Northern Girl Hobbies also has an amazing channel. She covers tons of stuff going on, and that's been going on in Canada and is continuing to go on in Canada. So if you're not subbed to her, please check out her channel. I dropped her link in there too.
Yeah, I just subbed to her, so yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome.
But yeah, thrift store. It's funny because it's kind of weird with all these shortages that you get. It's like now thrift shopping is. I mean, I've never seen the thrift stores. I don't know how it is where you guys are at, but the thrift stores are busy constantly because it's like that's the only place. It's like, and I'm like,
it's true.
If you're looking for some furniture, you're looking for some stuff.
That's right.
Well, the local thrift stores are good, but our Goodwill, I'm a little peeved at because They used to, you know,
when
you
we
used
first
to-
started going and hunting, right, for a way to turn this and that into something else, you know, or
they've
the
right.
prices were down considerably lower
Right.
2 years ago.
And now Goodwill, like specifically Goodwill, they have marked their prices. They have like jacked them way up, like as if they don't get all their stuff donated to them. And I know they got people to pay and stuff, but they didn't go hire more people. They just bumped their prices up.
Well, I've never been a big fan of Goodwill. I still shop there because, you know, if there's something I can find, especially I go there for all my beer mugs.
I go there for all my mugs,
all my steins and all my old German steins, but the I've never liked their principle of what they, because it was really not nearly as much of what you give or spend there is donated to much. I mean, and I think they're kind of on, whereas some of the other ones are better, I think, first from what I've experienced. So, but yeah, you can't beat that 50% off on Saturday. I mean.
No.
Crack of early dawn. It's like, honey, we're going to first go to Sam's Club, and then we're going to go to the
That's right, dude.
We're going to go to the art store, go to the Dollar Tree, and go to the other thrift store, and go to the other pawn shop. And
sounds like a good time.
That's right.
Oh, yeah.
I know. We were like trying to figure out what we're going to do tomorrow, and now I'm like, ooh, thrifting. Sounds like fun.
Well, you know, I actually found a movie the other day that I used to love a lot, and you can't find it ever on streaming. But there was, remember that movie One Fine Day with George Clooney and Michelle Pfeiffer?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You can't find it ever on streaming, but they have it on. They had it there. I was like, wow, that's cool, you know. And then so it's like it's amazing what you find. I found some old hymnals there and some old Bibles.
That's where I get my Bibles, man.
Yeah,
thrift stores and Goodwills. Yeah. Like these right here, the ones that I can just reach over and touch. I mean, and it's just full of someone marking all in it, and like, you know, not in a bad way either. It's good stuff they marked in here.
DS, I just sent you the link on Discord.
And I like to go for like the you know, for me the other thing too is the books, because I'm a big book guy, and my wife sometimes just feigns kind of like, what are you doing? Like I had to kind of go through some of that stuff, but like you can see behind me, I mean, I've got so many different books. I mean, and that doesn't account for all the other like 3 or 4 tubs of books, but I went out and got books that like are books that they're banning now, or books that they're not making abridged. And, you know, because some people are like, well, I have Audible. I'm like, do you know how many of those books are like not abridged? They're like shortened up. So,
right.
To me, that's an edited book.
Yeah.
When it's not abridged. So
yeah.
Why don't I have the full story?
This leather bound, large print, gold, inlay. What do you call it? Inlay Bible was $2.99 at Goodwill.
But you would have paid like, you know,
right,
$70-$100.
That's right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and in fact, even the that framed Indiana Jones poster behind me.
I was just gonna,
poster, I got that at the thrift store.
Hey, you see these framed posters behind me? Same thing.
Reservoir Dogs, Pulp Fiction, and Good, Bad, and the Ugly.
Yeah.
Yep.
So
Northern Girl Hobbies, did he say anything vital that we need to hear?
Right. Please inform me, because I saw you were going to listen to what he had to say about the banks, and I was like, oh, I'm going to have to do that.
Yep. Yeah, and Northern Girl, their Anti had posted quite a few links earlier on. So when the live chat replay, if you want to scroll through, he posted quite a few links to info about the banks and stuff. Anti always has good information.
Yeah, he's fast on that stuff.
I put my Discord link in the chat. If anybody's interested, I can help walk you through the process of figuring out Discord. It is a little confusing at first, but it is a really great site, and you'll see a lot of familiar faces and a ton of information. So if you want to be able to get links, my Discord's kind of set up like a library. So
that's how
yeah.
I kind of redid mine too, and I'm doing it that way. It's just making an archives more than it is just a chat room thing.
Yeah. But it's also a great way to communicate directly with someone without having to share personal information, personal contact info. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's hard to watch any. Kelly said I can't watch CP anymore, just not my kind of videos. It's
Yeah, I you know,
once you figure out the algorithm just loves, like, it's hard to watch anybody once they get kind of big, because I don't know, I think you kind of get to a point where you either rely on that money or really crave the views and the accolades, and so you kind of keep doing it. But
Yeah, what was the name of that documentary? Oh, I cannot remember the name of it right now, but there's a, well, let me talk about what it is. Somebody will remember. There's a documentary that came out maybe 3 years ago now, maybe 2, but it was about it was like from former big tech employees, and it was talking about like basically how the algorithms got out of control, how it went from
the social conundrum, or
a social
iRobot. No, I'm
dilemma,
just kidding.
a social dilemma.
that's it.
Mhm. Yeah, thanks. Like I was like, I know somebody's gonna know. Yeah, or the social dilemma or a social dilemma. And I last I checked for it, it was on YouTube, so you can find it. But it's if you haven't seen it, it's really worth watching. I mean, it basically tells us how we're all getting pigeonholed into these different, categories, and how it's gotten out of, apparently out of their control too. But I don't know if I really believe that or not.
I would say that is somewhat true.
Yeah, except I kind of think maybe that's true for like the general public, or even the employees that weren't aware of the plan. You know what I mean? But I think it was
Yeah.
intentional by the people who were really in charge.
Well, we don't know him personally, but if I can give a shout out to Southern Prepper One, he's pretty good. He's not doom, and he
He's a pretty good dude.
These boots on the ground segments where he's just taking emails and like information that he gets from people in local area that's like, hey, peanut butter used to be $2.79 a jar, now it's $5.79, and that's
Different reports.
Yeah, my wife likes his stuff. Or likes that
Yeah.
video, that channel.
he's Christian.
Northern
He doesn't.
Girl, sorry, really quick, did you do a video that's a fake prepper canning video? And if it's, what is it really of? Is it just like a false front for intel?
Is it money laundering?
No, it's a
Controlled opposition.
Speaking of which, if you haven't checked out my little video, it tells a little bit about it. It's just like a 10-minute video about the backstage speakeasy. Check that out. We had our first one about it was like a week ago, and it was awesome. We were backstage for like 5.5 hours or something, and we just keep it backstage, and that way we can talk more openly without having, I mean, we're pretty open here anyway. I'm not trying to censor really how much what we're saying, but we can share things there too that we won't get struck down from YouTube for. So check out the backstage speakeasy. And if you see that it says that I'm going live and it's called the backstage speakeasy, I'm not really probably going live. Just come and click on the link and come back. You can back in StreamYards. It looks just like it looks pretty much up on panel. And there's a chat also. So you can stay in chat if you want to, or you can come up on panel. You can come up on panel and not show your face and just talk. You can come up on panel and just sit there muted and stay in the chat. It doesn't really matter. So it's
That's
just
really
like
cool.
just open backstage. I know it can be intimidating the first time to click that link and get back there, but it's not recorded and it won't be live. Unless, like, for that 10-minute video, I told everybody, hey, are you guys okay going live for a minute? I'm going to talk about what this is, but I'd never go live without letting you know. So anyway, just wanted to give a little plug for that and explain what it is in case you see that I have something scheduled, and I'll just keep bumping the time back. So, as we go, you'll know we're still back there. Yeah. Well, Kelly, come on back and stay in chat if you want to. When that happens, I'd love to see more people back there. And for any of you who have channels, if you ever want to give it a try, I can, kind of walk you through it. I think you can figure it out pretty well too. But use that hashtag, the backstage speakeasy, if you would, because my idea is we can kind of network, and that way, we can search for the backstage speakeasy, and people could find, where people are hanging out backstage. So just another idea for how we can connect and keep communication open.
I think that's a great idea.
Yeah.
A minute detail.
Buff.
Just breathe, Buffer. Just breathe.
I'll walk you through it. I promise.
Just breathe.
Happy Friday.
Yeah,
Hola.
thanks for being here, DS. Good to see you.
Yeah, good to be on. Had to participate from chat for a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This has been a really interesting. I love how our conversations, I never plan anything. It's kind of like, I'm sure there's enough going on in the world. We'll come up with topics, and it's kind of fun to just see where this goes.
Yeah.
Well, if you don't mind me circling back on something real quick,
Mhm.
and I'd mentioned it in chat earlier to Landon. You were talking about the parades and like the Olympics and how they were very kind of like satanic and occult directed.
Yeah.
Well, one of the things that recently came to my attention is the fact that Lucifer was considered to be the angel who was in charge of entertainment and especially like music and stuff. So
Right.
as we're watching the stuff and as we're watching the way that the world is going, and even the U.S. to a pretty good extent, or Western culture as a whole, we are definitely going as a culture more towards that side of the spectrum. And so I think we will see that become more and more prevalent of a theme.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree with that. And if you think about the word entertain, it really, you think about entertain, you entertain, and then get entertainment, and really at its heart, it's about enjoyment. And again, there's nothing wrong with enjoyment or pleasure, but pleasure for the sake of pleasure is
And be
something
gluttonous.
that can lead into sin. That can lead into
Right, because
things of the
gluttony
flesh.
doesn't just pertain to food. It's essentially gluttony is a lack of self-control. So like, watching too many movies, or eating too much food, or
playing too many games, or
yeah, that's right. That's
yeah.
right. Really.
Or just doing something and you have no control. You let your body or you let your urges guide you.
Yeah.
Yep.
Kelly, the label on it says the Alex Jones was right jar.
Ooh.
I never knew that.
Yeah, it started off as kind of a backhanded thing when I was at a company that I used to work at during the COOF stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just listening to a lot of the banter going on in the office behind me and in my department, and was looking at the double standards as far as the policies in the office, depending on what everyone's stance was, or not their stance, but their poke status.
Yeah.
And it ended up with a conversation between me and this other gentleman that I worked with, and he was on the very opposite side of the political belief spectrum that I was, and we're talking about stuff, and I'm realizing that there's a lot of stuff that he believed incorrectly about just based off of actual evidence that's out there, but his information came from sources like MSNBC, and there'd be a conversation about something, and I would say something based off of what I was seeing, and it would come up later to be right. But at the time when I was discussing it with him, he goes, where'd you get that from, Alex Jones? And so I posted that as the background on my computer at work. And it just kind of has been a running theme since.
Nice.
Cognitive dissonance.
I had actually had a similar situation with a friend's wife on Facebook, where she was basically saying, "Where are you getting that from? Are you getting that from Alex Jones?" And I'm like, "No, I'm actually getting that from the New England School of Medicine. That's what I'm getting that from." But that's the first thing, like, where are you getting that from? It's like,
Yeah,
like did you
in the
see?
documents.
Did you see, Indy, that whole hearing that they had yesterday with the journalist about the Twitter files?
No, I didn't.
Oh man, and the Democrats are like, just tell us your sources, Elon. Just tell us. Just tell us. It's like, and they're like they're basically wanting to break the shield law, trying to get the pressure these journalists into, and I'm like, what happened to the party that was all about like deep throat and everything? Now they're like, what was your source? And he's like, I can't tell you. Why does that matter? And she's like, guys, if it was Elon, then it was Elon. And you could tell that they would keep on pushing the
right, Ashley,
the Russia interference. You could see that like, every time one of the Democrats getting up, they were like going, oh yeah, Russian interference. Elon. It's like, and it's just like kind of like. Oh man,
doesn't it feel like with as much as they're pushing, it's just going to reveal like they're showing their hand more and more,
Oh yeah, and then when what's his name gets up there,
Jim
Chuck
Jordan,
Schumer, and says that Fox News needs to stop Tucker Carlson.
Yeah,
I'm like, wow, that's not a good look.
When we're talking about stuff that comes up on, say, The View, for example, there was a clip from here maybe 2 weeks ago about East Palestine, Ohio, where the argument was made in support of Biden not going there because, well, they didn't vote for him. He doesn't represent them.
Oh, that's disgusting.
The blatant lie out of that is really astounding. I mean, considering the president is the president for the entire country.
Yeah. Well, Biden also said that MAGA Republicans are the ones who wanted to defund the police. So, who's really believing what he's talking about?
You see these people, and I that's why I love Jim Jordan, because like even when he's like at the beginning of these, like and someone says something, he's like, no, you can't be saying that. Like it's just like he's got to like corral all of them, like they're because they're just they foam at the mouth. They're just like, well, we know that this was Russian, and it's kind of like it's kind of interesting because they had before that, the day before, they had all those top execs, former execs, or whatever, who were in charge, and that guy that was that lawyer, man, I forget his name, but oh man, it was just kind of like he caught him in a lie because he was like Jim Jordan's like, well, what about this email that says that you guys were given like it was your choice to decide who wanted to have classified status, and he's like, well, I don't have classified status, and no one I know has classified status. It's like, but why did they email that to you and say that you could pick the 10, and you said cool, thanks, or whatever? And he's like, well, some people here might have it, and he's like, you just lied. You're just lying now. You're denying the fact that the government gave you classified access so that you could collude, basically. It's like, and they're just like it's funny. It's like, are you telling me that you really expect us to believe that? Like you say 1 minute, you're like, oh, no one I know has it, and then you're like, well, some people probably do.
Yeah. But that's what I'm saying. Like, I think there's got to be so many people that are starting to put the pieces together, They just have to be. Like,
oh, yeah, they are. And even the ones that don't, it's like, I put something on my Facebook. I said, we're at a point where at the last 3 to 4 years, almost every one of the government's narratives has been proven to be either a bold-faced lie or completely lacking in context. And I was like, if you still want to believe these narratives, that's your choice, but that's your willful decision of being ignorant. It has nothing to do with the facts, because you clearly are not. I mean, and I think the same thing with what Tucker showed with all these videos. It's like, I'm not going to mention the day or whatever, but like it's like all of these things, and I think they know that all of these narratives are falling apart, and that really at the heart of all of it is collusion on their part, and all that stuff is becoming exposed now.
And a big thing with that, they are liars. They've been proven to be liars. But what they do as liars is when they're exposed, they double down on the lie and try to drive the lie harder. And in doing that, they will expand it. They will exaggerate it additionally. And what needs to happen is that the counterpoint of that is additionally driven home and, more or less double down on the truth.
Or if it doesn't go the way that they intend, and it backfires, or if it doesn't go the way they intend, they kind of dive back down into secrecy, change their name up, and adapt.
I think people that are absolutely unwilling to look at things and even consider the fact that they could be wrong are in denial, because if they're wrong, they realize that they like that doesn't sound like a Christ follower to me. And I could be wrong. That's not a blanket statement. But if they're wrong, that means that they have been putting the totally wrong thing at the priority in their life, and they're going to have to answer for it. And they really can't think of that being true, because it's
and either way, fear is driving them, and that's not a Christian attribute. It's to give into fear, because we're supposed to fear the Lord first. But the fear that they're giving into is they're either giving into the fear that the narrative that they've been told will happen, and they're told that that's such a bad thing, or they have that kind of unconscious fear, which is if I do kind of start asking questions, then everything I've been told, everything I've built up in the last few years will be of a lie, and that means everything that I've sacrificed, everything I've done, will be for naught. And so either way, they're too afraid, and that's the thing, is that that's what usually people who don't want to admit that they're wrong is they're afraid of and I go back to that verse in the Bible where it talks about, and it may be unspecified, or Landon, you can give me the exact one off the top of my head. I can't think of it, but where he talks about how a fool will take 100 stripes, but the wise man takes reproval, takes correction.
Well, let's see, because what it makes me think of is every man a liar, but God be the truth. But a righteous man may fall 7 times, but he gets back up. That's what it makes me think of.
But the idea that, when you think about corporal punishment, the way that it used to be, and that you would just take those lashes and you keep on taking it, like you get to a point where you divorce the fact that you're being lashed, and you don't see it as a bad thing. And I think when you see all the things that are happening now in our society, and all the pain that's being enforced on everybody as a whole and as a population, and you see that pain, and yet you still continue to seek out that pain because it's a pain that still comforts you. And yet it's not the same kind of thing that David's saying when he says, "Thy rod and thy staff comfort me," because again, if the shepherd has to, break your leg so that you can mend it and be closer to him, then that's a beneficial thing to you. But these people that are the foolish people are the people that are going out and they're kind of doing this self-inflicted wound to themselves. And they're doing it because they don't know any better. It's like you think about we were talking earlier about the Israelites when they got, or right before the Israelites, the Hebrews, when they got out of Egypt, and they immediately are like bemoaning the fact that they're not enslaved anymore.
Right. Yeah.
Even after everything God showed them, how everything, they still want to go back to that because that's where their identity is. And I think a lot of these people on the other side, their identity is so, it's like me and my wife have friends, and she listens to like NPR all the time, and she thinks because it's government that they would not lie to her, or even if you don't believe in an intentional lie from the government, she denies the fact that a lot of the journalism from that is coming from a tainted source where people are drinking the same water well. So they're sharing a Washington Post story because they have the same, flawed information. But it's just kind of like that. They don't want to see it. And it's because I think they're afraid that they're going to lose their identity. And that just goes to show you that if you're relying on the government to tell you what you need to know or what you need to believe, then you really are not a human being in a way, because you're now subject to the state. The state is your God.
Rebuke is more effective for a wise man than 100 blows on a fool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think we also though need to be careful because, there's that whole plank eye. We don't want to be.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Like we've got it all figured out. We need to keep our hearts open and our minds open as well.
And that's why I shared that video when I made my video about what Rogan was saying too, when he was like, you got to forgive. That has to happen. I'm not saying this out of like I know better. I'm just saying what I'm just trying to objectively say. Like the reason I know that is because I know that I've held on to narratives because I was afraid or because I had limited information. But at some point, if you refuse to see the truth, it's because you don't want to see the truth. At some point,
I remember, when I remember one of the things that made me really, I don't know, feel more confident in the direction I was going when I started like paying closer attention and diving into figuring things out was the reaction that I got from so many of my family and friends on the more liberal side of things, because they could not see where anybody else was coming from, and most of them didn't want to. They really didn't.
Right.
Whereas I felt like I could see where they were coming from, but I could see where they were where they were wrong, or see faults in their thinking, or see information they were lacking. It was like they couldn't put themselves in my shoes to see where I was coming from at all. You know what I mean? Does that make sense? Like, I don't know if any of you experienced that, but I remember like very, very like vividly that I was noticing that happening over and over and over again. And it was like, that's when I started to feel like there was a spiritual veil, because these are people that I'd known, and we didn't always agree before that, but it'd always been okay to disagree, we could agree to disagree is what I was trying to say. And then also I still felt like they could understand and respect where I was coming from in the past. Whereas with these issues, it was just like a complete blindness to even being able to question or ask about it.
And that does happen. That does happen on the right too. And I'll be honest with you. And I'm not trying
I'm sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
So I'm sorry. People are coming in from Shane's. I just want to say thank you, Shane, for sending people over. Shane Phelps. I don't know, Buffering, if you can grab his link, but I'll grab his link in a minute. And thank you so much, Mr. B. See you there too. Awesome. Thank you so much for coming over. Appreciate it.
Real quick, if I may.
Yeah.
Kind of linking what you were just talking about and something that John had touched on.
Good to see you, Al.
A lot of people right now are really focused on their identities.
Exactly.
And they're associating their stance on things with their identities. And when people are so focused on their identity, they lose the ability to be connected and empathetic towards others. So they're not able to see others' point of view or where someone else is coming from, or just other possibilities to what they believe.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And yeah, I agree with that 100%.
And that's something that I would like to, I myself would like to start encouraging people to do, is stop looking at their own identity and trying to focus on it, and maybe be able to start moving things the right direction.
Yeah. Right. And I think that what that requires, and we were talking about this earlier, I don't know if you were in the chat on that minute, but is that what it requires that you have to be able to do is you have to be willing to, you can still advocate what you believe. You can still advocate for what you think is right. But when it becomes essential that is proven or that is believed by everyone, like I said, there are certain essential truths that you don't want to, I couldn't be in a chat and be here for 3.5 hours or whatever if you were all atheist Marxists, right? I mean, like, that would not have happened. So at some point there has to be some kind of fundamental basic worldview values that are shared. But I do think that in order to kind of get those things with the identity, we also have to understand why people are prone to seeking out their identity first, and that's why I think so much people are so divided, is because once you say something that someone disagrees with, that position, you're now attacking their identity rather than like a belief or or you're saying something like an ideological stance, right? You're like, okay, well, and it used to be, it wasn't that way, right? You could say, well, I don't believe in funding this or this or that, and people would be like, okay, well, I think you're wrong. But now you say something, and it's to say your ideological position is to attack someone else's identity. And I don't think it's by accident that identity politics have had that kind of infusion. And also, I actually said in one of my podcasts about how identity is actually one of the first lies that the devil gives to us in fooling us about what our salvation is. Because when we start when we start to feel those inadequacies, which we all do at one point in our life, we're going to feel broken, we're going to feel ashamed, we're going to fear alone, we're going to fear afraid, we're going to feel all those things that a broken human nature does feel. But when you try to augment that or try to create a false identity, and then therefore your life then becomes about promoting that identity to the point where you can't hear out a brother or a sister, you can't have a civil conversation, then you're losing out on the basics of humanity right there. Bingo, right there. And that's because then that becomes, you become automatron. And I did that too for a long time. Like I could remember being in church and
it's like
saying,
the opposite of what Jesus said, though.
Yeah. There's the praise people. There's the people that go to the 8 o'clock service. There's the people that like the guitar and there's the people that don't like, and you start then making people into subset groups. And when you start doing that, then they lose their identity, they lose their humanity and become an object on which and that's why tribalism is so out of whack right now, in my opinion.
So how do we, we've kind of talked about this a little bit already tonight, but what are the main steps we can see that we can take to put an end to that? You know what I mean? To reach, like we said, reach across that aisle.
Operate in love.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
I think, and I think too, the other thing too is you have to be willing to look at somebody and don't be like, hey, you're so wrong for believing something that I don't believe. Think about asking, okay, well, what's there a reason? There has to be a reason why you believe what you believe. And if I'm willing to hear you out on why you believe what you believe, will you be willing to hear me out when I tell you what I think?
And if that respect can't be given, that, also to remember not to throw our pearls before swine.
Exactly.
And that if they reject you, that, like when Jesus was sending his disciples to cities before him to prepare the way for him, if they were to reject them, Jesus' instruction was to knock the dust off your feet and to be like, woe to you, like, and that it's okay to extend that olive branch, because we should look at it as trying to pluck them from the fire, or we're trying to, rather than correcting them, because Jesus didn't address everything wrong with you at once.
No.
You know what I mean? That like working with Jesus, you stop doing this, just because of, it's about the heart.
And I think the other thing too is to remember that if Jesus can forgive the unforgivable in you, you can be far more forgiving than you think you're capable of. And
because God does say to forgive freely as he is forgiven.
Yes. And I do think that when it comes to like those points, especially when you're dealing with someone that has a different position or different, and they see it completely different than you, I think you have to be willing to say, okay, obviously I know where we're going to disagree, but let's find where maybe we can start off with where we agree and then build out of that. I think a lot of people, and I think you're seeing this, I think this is why you see like the rise of people like Joe Rogan. I think this is why you see people like Greg Greenwald, why you see people like, what's his name? The comedian that's
Russell Brand?
Russell Brand's one of them, but the other guy, what's his name? He's always on Tucker. What's his? I always forget his name. He wears the glasses and he always has like the blue background. It'll come to me. But you're seeing these guys who typically would be like liberal, and they're saying, "Wait a minute, yeah, we agree." Like they're talking about the issues that we have with these things, and so I think that's where you have to build the consensus and say, okay, someone like Dave Rubin, like for example, Dave Rubin, I'm not going to agree with him on his lifestyle. We're not going to have that agreement because I hold to a biblical view about what marriage is. I don't disrespect him for that, but I don't think he's in consistency with what the Bible teaches about that. However, you can tell that he is somebody that understands that the radical left right now is not just attacking the right, but attacking their own. There's almost like a very like small cultish line of, like, again, it's like with the same thing as you saw with like the BLM. Like it's not enough that you say, "Oh, I'm not a racist." You have to like say, "I'm anti-racist."
Right.
Well,
and then they redraw the line, and then they redraw it's never good enough.
Yeah.
Because it can't be satisfied.
Right.
Hey, can I jump in here real quick?
Yes, yes, yes,
I
sir.
want to say thank you, Indy, for having me up. I'm gonna kick back, put on a documentary or something.
Yeah, thanks so much for coming up.
Oh yeah,
Much love, Big Chap.
Hanging out.
Awesome. I had fun talking with everybody tonight. It was interesting. I learned a lot too. So
It was,
You
this
take
was a
care,
great
brother.
conversation
All right,
tonight.
brother. See you later,
you
man.
guys take it easy. Stay safe. All right. God bless.
Much love.
Much love, brother.
Yeah, if you guys, anybody listening or watching later, if you're not subbed to Big Chap, you're missing out. Go sub before he gets his channel taken down.
Him and Ronnie, man, I'm telling you what, the stuff that they put on Ronnie's channel, like I'm like, you guys are close.
Yeah, something else, if you don't mind, I'd like to kind of tie in with what Landon was saying regarding, I believe that was in the book of Matthew when Jesus was saying that if the town is unaccepting, to knock the dust off their feet and continue going on. One of the other things that came out of that, because I was actually just listening to someone reading the book of Matthew earlier today, is where he's speaking of the parable with the farmer sowing seeds, and some of them fall on rocky ground, some of them fall on thorny ground.
Yep.
And some of them on the fertile soil. So when you're talking to people and you're trying to, have the conversations and try to kind of extend the olive branch and bring peace, not everyone's going to be accepting of it, and not everyone who is initially accepting of it is going to
understand,
really grab hold of it.
Right.
Right. And I think that goes back
or for someone who
Go ahead.
for someone who would go from a sports analogy, you don't have to bat 1,000.
Exactly. You just have to be one. You have to. I think of that scene from The Patriot where he says, aim small, miss small, right? And he's telling the kids how to shoot and making sure he's like, aim. And I do think that if you try to sometimes hit for the head, rather than trying to hit somewhere on the torso or on the greater expanse, you can also have the opportunity of hitting a small right on and killing the target, but you also have an opportunity of missing by a small margin and not doing anything at all. And especially with that musket kind of warfare, that was even if you shot somebody in the torso, that would still put them down on the ground. But I do think that is important. Like understand, and you'll never know when you'll have that moment where your love will show them something about themselves, and you'll never know also when that moment when you have to come to them and you have to say something very hard. It's hard to tell them, but it's a truthful thing because you love them and you want to correct them. And that's the other thing too. We have a whole idea that if you tell someone something they don't want to hear, then you're not being loving, and that's not true at all. Because the best people in your life are the people who are always saying, "Hey, I think you might be a little off on that," or
that's
"Hey,
right.
maybe you should consider this next time." Or
that's
why I always say, if I say anything, correct me. If you find proof, if I'm saying something that is abundantly false that you can prove to me, you can show it to me, you can give me a good reason, I will listen to you out, because that's part of what being a brother is to hear another brother out. And I think in order to get to that point where you can get someone to hear you out, you have to show that love, but you also have to be willing to know when that moment comes when you have to say the hard truth. But I do think that you never know how something will be taken or how a deed is done. And so you have to sow those things within your life, and you just have to, I think you have to pray that every day and say, hey, God, if there's someone right now who, needs something, well, no, the aim small, miss small was also in Patriot as well. I could bring it up, but I don't want to get in these channel struck, but it's in there. Because I memorize every line that Mel Gibson ever says, because Mel Gibson looks a lot like my dad, and so like every time I hear Mel Gibson talk, I feel like I'm hearing my dad talk.
Aww.
But and I love that movie. But one of the few movies that Roland Emmerich did, I love. But I do think that is something that is important for how you get into those things, and it's important. You never know where that is, but I do think. And I go back to the verse in Isaiah 55 where it talks about how the word of God rains down on us and makes even places that are hard to grow. So it is possible that you can grow something out of a difficult thing, out of a thing where it doesn't necessarily going to grow. And you just have to trust in God for the right the wisdom to know when the right time is, because there is a time, like what Landon said, when you have to just dust off your feet. There is a time where the best thing you can do is say, hey, look, we're so at an impasse right now, but how do I show
But I
you
love
love?
you.
Yeah, but I love you.
Right.
Yeah. And hope that what that will do is that will show them, hey, because I think that's the thing too that you get with people now is it's especially on our side or people who I will identify as on my side of the issue, especially with the things that have happened. It's very easy to say, look, all these narratives have been proven true. See how right I am. See how right you got to be careful of getting into that thought too.
Yeah, that's throwing bricks.
Yeah.
Mhm.
But going back to what you were saying, Indy, because you're saying, well, we want to be careful of looking down on. The other thing too is I think you should learn from your experiences and you can say, hey, look, I used to think this way about this thing, and then I saw where I could have been off base, and I looked into it, and this is where I came from this conclusion. Because I think sometimes, when you can kind of like not throw bricks or your language can be disarming, then I think you'll have better successes, I think.
Yeah.
What is
Yeah.
it?
I mean,
Kind word, turn away wrath. What is it?
I think that's right.
It's a soft word.
A soft word. Soft answer turneth away wrath.
Mhm.
There's another part. I'm sorry, babe.
Mm-mm.
And to that end,
Because
when
you can tick someone off or trigger them, I'm sorry, I'm in a minute detail.
No worries. Wasn't sure if you were trying to finish a thought there or not.
But grievous words stir up anger.
D-Dog, so good
What
to
up,
see
baby?
you. Thanks for coming up. My favorite stalker.
Well, that was funny shit 6 months ago.
Right? I know. And here you still are. It's like,
Yeah. Well, here you still are.
Right. It goes both ways. It's mutual.
I use this to make most of my decisions. It's the Bible.
Mm-hmm.
Amen.
And it depends what I'm doing. If I'm dealing, well, I don't know if the rest of the panel knows what I do.
I don't.
I constantly been fighting the
do,
government since 2007, 2008 on anything they do.
Right
and
on.
This is my best reference for anything having to do with governance. Because there's over 2,000 scriptures that just has to do with governance. And it tells what good government is, what bad government is. Just in the Constitution, there's 1,200 scriptures in there. Nobody knows that anymore. The First Amendment, there's 14 scriptures in that.
Wow.
Yeah, that is amazing. I'm trying to. Oh, thank you, Kino. Thank you, Mike.
And it's also a book of war. It'll tell you about great battles, and the great battles that we're seeing now have already been done. It's just different names, and great victories and great failures. The promise of hope. Everything's in there. You just have to figure out what book you need. It's a book of law too. 1 Corinthians 6 is what a jury is for, how to put it together, and penalties for using it improperly.
And I think the other thing that you could sum up with the scripture about what you're talking about there, D-Dog, is Ecclesiastes 3. There is a time for everything under the sun.
Right. And Matthew 15 and 16 tells you how to put together an affidavit.
Right.
And the Bible even tells us that there's supposed to be 3 different sections having to do with government. I can't remember the actual scripture number, but it's God is my judge, God is my lawgiver, God is my king. That's your Congress, your executive branch, and your judicial branch, all right there.
That's awesome. founding fathers
That's
were
fantastic.
divinely inspired.
Very much. We also have a very dark past, but I try to stay out of that when I'm talking to people.
Mm-hmm.
And
Well,
I talk to a lot of people daily, and every now and then we have a little get together. Like last Thursday, I had 20 some people come out to Howell from Detroit to a banquet, and I think there was 12 or 13 out of Flint, and a few of them out of Ann Arbor and Lansing, which are very, very liberal areas. And you know, so I have Muslims that I'm talking to. I have Christians. I have atheists. I have Satanists. I talk to them all, and we're going through what their rights are and everything else. And I keep referring to the Bible, and they're getting offended. And I said, but I'm not using it as a holy book. I'm using it as a book of governance, because that's. And then I go into the thing about our founding fathers, and this is what they used: the 1599 Geneva Bible. During the Constitution Convention, there was 3 copies there. 1 copy was George Washington's, and 2 copies were Benjamin Franklin. It's right in the congressional record.
I always love when you come up, B-Dog, because you drop these like huge ideas that I've never considered before. That I just, oops, sorry, DS, I just kicked you out again. There we go. But I
was wondering what
I
happened.
really do appreciate it. Yeah, sorry. Well, I think you got bumped out, and then you came right back in. Like it let you back in right as I bumped you again. Sorry.
Nice.
Well, interesting timing. I mean, I'm actually going to have to get scooting so I can put the kiddos to bed.
Mhm.
So I'll jump back into the chat side. But real quick, one parting thought on this. Because Kelly S. had mentioned something regarding it with trying to communicate with people without putting them on the defensive.
Yeah.
And a big part of that is, even if you are right and you know you are right, we need to avoid being arrogant.
exactly.
Which is a tall task.
It is.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Anyways, with that, good night, folks.
Good night. Have a good
Night.
night. Thank you so much for
Love
coming
you, brother.
up.
And one of the things that I talked about in my podcast, because I did a podcast, I feel like because I actually, Indy, it was like a 2-hour, like all total recording time I did like on this was like 1 hour and 40 minutes. But I was kind of breaking down like how to reconcile, and I kind of end it with the fact that at some point the onus may be upon you to say, this person may be wrong, but God has forgiven them. And if God can forgive them, I can forgive them. If God loves them, then I love them. And more importantly, the joy that I have in knowing that God loves me and knows that even though whatever I'm going through, he has gone through, that will endure me to say, look, I can suffer a brother or a sister being wrong with the hope that, because and I even said, I got actually kind of emotional because I said, like, when he's there on the cross, Jesus is on the cross, and he says, Father, and he's beginning to be distant from his Father. He says, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. Like, even in the moment of his agony, in the moment of his suffering, in the moment of his apex where he's about to die and he's about to be completely separated from the Father, and he knows exactly what's going to happen. He knows exactly why he's there. He still shows love, that kind of love. And I think that we have to do is we have to be able to say, look, Father, forgive them. They are wrong. But Father, forgive me and lead me to be whatever which way you want me to do, and pray. And I think if you can say that and you can do that, you'll never know how much showing forgiveness to another person will change their life. I really do believe that. Like, I think if you, like, I know what it's like to have been wronged, and I know what it's like to have wronged someone else. And it's one of the worst feelings in the world when you've wronged someone that you really, truly love and care about. And when that person says it's okay, that's why I hate when people go, well, when someone says, oh, my kid just did this or whatever, and they go, it's okay. No, say what it is. If they've done something wrong, then forgive them for the wrong and then forget it and move on. Now, if that person continues to show that they are in the wrong and they're constantly saying things that are wrong, if you have the ability to be in their circle, and I think this is one of the problems that we have with social media, is that when we expand our circle of our outreach, and we think that because someone's our friend on Facebook or someone follows us on YouTube or Twitter, that kind of gives us the right to tell that person how they're wrong, and not realizing that it's probably best if somebody who knows you, like obviously if someone you cared about in your life knew something and one of us knew something and that became evident, I would imagine that person that's closest to you when they came to you would matter the most. I can remember my brother before he passed away. He was the one person I could never BS. He was the one person that I could say all kinds of things and try to like puff up whatever I was doing. And he's like, I don't buy it. He's like, I know you can be better than that. I know you can do better than that. And he knows, and he'd always tell me, I know because I suffer with it too. I struggle with it too. But so at first I hated him for when he said it to me. Like there would be times I wanted to just punch him in the face, and Landon, I don't know if you have a brother or if you do, D-Dog, but
I do.
When you have a brother, it gets that way. It's like 1 minute you want to punch him, the next minute you want to hug him.
I have 3 older brothers, so I completely understand what you're talking
There
about.
There you go. But now that he's gone, like those things that he told me, they have stayed with me, because I realized in the moment I didn't realize what he was saying, but afterwards, as I was given much time, I looked, and so that's why I think you should also not only double down on being loving, but also be willing to say to someone that you love, hey, I think you might need to reconsider something. Mm-hmm. And that's what my brother would always do. He's like, I'd make some kind of, I used to be a really bad Pharisee when I was younger. I used to judge a lot of things and a lot of people. And that comes from the denominational history that I have. I mean, I believe, this is just my opinion, that people who come from my denomination tend to be a bit more rigid and kind of more, they kind of look down more on other people because they don't, there's like an idea that, they're not as scholastic as we are with our doctrine, which is itself not something that Jesus wants us to like put a feather in our cap about. Oh yeah, right. I know how to, I know how to, but he would always constantly tell me things like, you can't say that, John. I'd say, well, but that one group of people, they would really, he said, you can't say that. And I go, why not? He said, because you're judging people. And I'd hate it. I'd hate it when he would tell me what I didn't want to hear. But I realized he was right. And he never gave me attitude. Anybody that knew my brother, he was like 6'4" and he weighed 320 pounds. He was like a teddy bear. He was a teddy bear. And it took a lot to make him want to punch you. and even when he wanted to punch me, he actually punched the wall. That's how much I knew my brother loved me. And I think you get to that point, and Landon, I think you could probably understand that too. It's like where he's like, and a punch, you still have to use that force because that emotion is just so good, but he still had that control. And because I would always say things. I was such a passive aggressive little, but he would punch the wall, and yet even when he punched the wall, and he would cry that he had to do and it's just like, and there was those moments right there that we wrestled in, and sometimes that happens in your relationships. You have to wrestle with the fact that you have a divide, but you still have to stick with it, and you still have to love, and you still have to be willing to be honest. But I think it's amazing now that he's gone, how much those things echo more. And I have pledged my life to say, like, one of the ways I can honor his memory and honor what he meant to me is to remember the things he told me. Mm-hmm. And you never know what impact you'll have on someone's life, and when that person's gone, what that means to you. And that's why I think our actions do matter in a lot of ways.
Everything you say, everything you do matters. You never know the effect you have.
Kind of along those lines, I have, like I said, I have 3 older brothers, and there were a lot of holes punched in walls over the years. And I never thought of it as from that perspective of it being a, in a way, a
Control.
sign of control. Yeah. That they weren't just fully going
Protection.
at each other. Right.
I love.
Anyways, interesting perspective I hadn't considered before. So thanks.
Yeah.
For that.
Well, like I said, it's at the time I would just I because again, my brother was sometimes a bouncer, and he'd sometimes
Yeah. Two of mine have done that in the past as well.
Yeah,
so.
if he put arms on you, if he put hands on you, let's just be honest, you probably deserved it. Because my brother was the most loving person. In fact, to a fault, you would say that he probably loved more, and he would like you'd always say, well, he's like, oh, that's my friend from the bar. He's a really good guy. I'm like, I don't know, buddy, I don't know about that. He's like, yeah, and it's like, and I think that. But he did show that love, and even when I would upset him and anger him, and I'd say things, and I knew that I was hurting him. There was other things that he did that I just did. I found out later in life. Like I found out he used to like go up on top of the stairs, and because we used to live in a house, and he lived in the top floor and I lived in the bottom floor, and he would just sit there at the top of the stairs, and he wouldn't come down. But he wanted to hang out with me, but he knew that I was kind of busy I was playing my video games, or I was doing something that I was, but he could never kind of just come by and tell me. And so he just hang there, and, he would always just want to hang around, and it's like, and of course he would always upset me. He knew what the right wing, he wasn't completely innocent. He knew
how to press your button.
He knew how to push my buttons big time. Oh yeah. He knew exactly all the history we had, all the things we had. He knew exactly what button to push, and he got it. He got a kick out of that. And as I've kind of learned from my wife, I kind of think I picked up that bad habit from my family dynamic of relating through teasing, and sometimes not realizing that a lot of people can be put off by that teasing.
Mm-hmm. Do you guys see that a minute detail said he was a bouncer once upon a time too?
I saw that.
We've got all these watchers in here.
That's right.
Mm-hmm.
All these sheepdogs.
Right. Well, you guys, I'm getting hungry, and my husband texted that he's making dinner. So.
Yep. I go as well. So.
I hate. Yeah. I was actually going to end right before D-Dog came up, but I hate to leave when we've got so many great people up here and we're having such great conversation. So thank you so much to everybody that came up tonight on panel and everybody who's been here in chat. We'll be back again. The plan is to be back here in 2 weeks. We have our Bible study going. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, we have our Bible study going every other week. So we've been watching The Chosen, and it's amazing. I had seen like parts of different episodes, but it's really good. If you haven't seen it, you can find it online for free and a few different places. And
it's so good.
Yeah, and I recommend the Jesus Revolution if you haven't seen it, because that's a great conversation about that.
I can't wait to see Jesus Revolution.
Good movie.
I haven't seen it.
Highly recommend it.
We should do a backstage watch of that. We should do a movie night. Okay, so stay tuned for the backstage speakeasy where we'll be watching the Jesus Revolution. That would be
hashtag.
Cool. Yeah, hashtag the backstage speakeasy. Yeah, and check out that video if you haven't seen it. It's just about a 10-minute video and kind of explains a little bit more in detail in the details of that video, but also, just in the video. So go check it out and feel free to use that hashtag and start up your own backstage speakeasy. I'd love to know if you do. I know a few other channels have started doing it, so I'm excited about that. It's kind of getting rolling a little bit. Let's get this momentum going. Because, I think things are going to get right now. I feel like we're able to speak more openly than we have been in, a little while, or maybe we just are, I don't know, whichever way that goes. But, I think they'll probably keep trying to squash that. So let's work around it,
Yeah.
Thank you again to everybody here. Thanks for the comments. I see what everybody's, saying in the chat. Thank you so much. And thank you again to everybody that came up. Much love.
Thank you so much for having us.
Yeah.
Exactly.
God bless, and we're stronger together. Let's keep trying to unite, and let's, like we talked about tonight, let's do what we can to love on people and, try to reach across the aisle.
Amen.
And bring some people over to our side, whatever side that is. No, cute, John.
You snuffled
All
up
right. Perfect way to end it.
Thanks
All right.
again.
Good night, everybody. God bless.
Good night.